I will call us to order. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to call our regular meeting of the Town Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Today is Tuesday, September 6th at 6:35 p.m. Hi, everyone. My name is Rob Klee, and I'm the chair of our Woodbridge Town Plan and Zoning Commission. Other members of the commissions who are here with us today are Paul Schatz, Yoni Zamir, Robert Reed, Andrew Skolnick, Kathy Hunter, and Susan Cassidy. So we have a almost full house. Jeff apologizes that he could not be here today. He is challenges of air travel in the post-Labor Day weekend. I do hope everyone had a nice, relaxing Labor Day weekend. Thank you to Chris Sullivan, who, as always, ably supports us in our efforts, including tonight. We are here in person. Nice to see all of you in person and all of the folks who have joined us here from the public. Our agenda has been posted on the town website, as are the materials in support of the various public hearings and other things that we're going to address this evening. On our agenda, we have two public hearings. The first is the continuation of the public hearing on the application of the Toll Brothers for 1710 and 1722 Litchfield Turnpike and 4953 and 57 Bradley Road for the development of an over 55 housing project. Our second public hearing will be on the application by Luciani Properties LLC for 110 Luciani Road for a special exception permit according to 3.3N of the regulations for the excavation, removal, filling, grading, and processing of earth products to construct two single-family homes. So, Chris, unless there's any objection, should we jump right into our continued public hearing for the Toll Brothers? Mm-hmm. Great. So I'll call our Toll Brothers applicants up to the microphone, but a bit of housekeeping first. Our TPZ commission members, Zamir and Cassidy, were both absent during the first part of the special meeting. Did you both have a chance to review the videos from that public hearing at its beginning?
Yes, I did, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you both. Do you both feel that you are able to participate in the continuation of this public hearing?
Yes, I do.
Great. And you will also have opportunities to ask questions of the applicant as we did last time, because this is a continuation of our public hearing. And you will also hear from the public as well. So that'll be the order of events going forward. We will start with the applicant. Members of the commission will ask their questions. Remember, for the commission, we are likely going to close our public hearing today on this application. That is our time to interact and ask questions of the applicant before we close the hearing. When we go into our work session, we can't, even though they're sitting in the room right over there, we're not allowed to ask them follow-up questions. So the goal would be to get all the questions out.
I just want to note that the commission's consulting engineer, Jim Preety from Criscolo Engineering, is here. So, Jim, I don't know if you want to come up and take a seat or what you want to do.
Sure. You're welcome to, or we will also definitely call you up.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, if you're comfortable there, you don't have to move yet, but we will definitely hear from our own consulting engineer as a part of this reopened public hearing. So with all of that, can the applicant go forward? And please, again, we have members who weren't here last time. Introduce yourself for the record. Sign in. Yes, please. And introduce your team as well. The other thing from the recordings, when you are over at the exhibit stand, try to bring one of the microphones closer to whoever is speaking, which will help with the audio quality. And with that, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening to all of you, and for those I didn't meet last time, my name is Joe Williams. I'm a land use attorney, partner in the law firm of Shipman and Goodwin. Our office is at 265 Church Street in New Haven, and it's good to be with you again. We appreciated the conversation last time and questions we received from you all members of the commission and from the public, and so we've been working since that first hearing on preparing some additional information for you that we believe will be responsive to those questions and comments that came forward. just for the agenda that we would propose to follow tonight to provide you that additional information. Eric Lindquist from Ty and Bond, our lead civil engineer on the project, will speak to the stormwater and other plan issues that have come up. And then Tom Wamser, our traffic engineer with Ty and Bond, will come up and he'll go over the additional comment letter that I believe you have from your consulting engineer, VN, and the final, hopefully, response letter that Tom and his group have provided to that letter from VN. And then I'll say a few words about the questions that came up about the age restriction proposed for the development. And with me also, if necessary to answer questions, they will chime in, are Mike Zamola and Jason Gottlieb from Toll Brothers. So with that, let's go first to Eric.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Eric Lindquist, Senior Project Manager with Ty and Bond, and a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. Thank you. I'll try and stay seated so I can stay close to the mic. I don't think I really need to do too much here, but the first thing I did want to mention was there was a reference in the VN reporting about additional sidewalk on the site. So we've discussed internally, and we agreed that we felt it would be prudent if we extended the sidewalk. So we haven't shown on the plans yet, but if this was deemed acceptable to commission, currently we have the sidewalk coming along the frontage of the property and then coming in. So we had talked about it, and we think that making the connection down to the existing sidewalk that's over here and making that a continuous loop would be the best thing to do. We agreed to that. We don't see a reason to have the sidewalk on the other side for several reasons. I brought them up in the response letter before, but we don't own this piece of property through here, so we can't have a continuous sidewalk through there. There's also no sidewalk over here to connect to, and no sidewalk up to the north to connect to, so it would pretty much be a sidewalk that has no connectivity, and we don't really see much of a value with that. But we do see the value with adding this, and we felt that would be prudent to make that recommendation for additional sidewalk. There were a few points made at the last public hearing I just wanted to touch on briefly and just make sure I can answer any questions that were raised. One was about fencing and the continuous loop of fencing around the site, as well as I think some confusion with the silt fencing. So the plan is to have sidewalk on all three sides of the property on the south side. So this right here, this line with the X through it is the fence that we're proposing in that area. It's a 6-foot wooden stockade fence. It's pretty much a solid fence. It's on the detail sheet. I forget which number, but that would wrap the entire site. And on the north side of the site, we would be showing fencing along this whole frontage here. We didn't think it was needed along this backside. It's wooded, and there wasn't as much of a need for it. So that's where the fencing is proposed. I think there might have been some confusion with the erosion control plans, which show, sorry, I got wrinkled, which shows some silt fencing that goes along here, which is the geosynthetic silt fence for erosion to prevent sediment from coming off the site and going onto neighboring properties. We usually put those at the toe of slopes. So those are shown in various locations around the site based on where we're at toes of slope to prevent erosion going over. There's a lot of areas where it actually comes into the site, so there's not a need for it in certain places. So I think that might have been part of the reason why there was thought not to be fence all over the place. So I just want to make sure that was clarified and that people could understand where the erosion control fence was versus where the stockade fences were. There was also a comment about dust. So this shows as if the site is fully cleared. That'll never happen. We'd only be doing it in sections. Michael spoke last time about that, where they'd come in and do a portion, get the buildings up, and then keep going as they went through as they sold. So the idea would likely be have a loop road through here, but these areas would be stabilized with vegetated cover throughout the entire time. When they did get disturbed for a building to go in, they'd be excavated and dug out. If it ever got dry, there'd be wetting of stockpiles. They'd also be covered. But the goal is typically to provide permanent, temporary vegetative cover over the areas as much as possible. And when vehicles come in and out of the site, they'd be covered. So that's all outlined in our erosion control narrative. So if you go read through that, it's in the report as well as on one of the sheets. I don't know if I have it on a board, but it's the narrative lays out those measures that are supposed to be in place to prevent dust from, or not prevent it, but minimize as much as possible dust mitigation coming off the site through wind blown and all that stuff. So those measures are in there. We'll also be submitting to Connecticut Deep for a general permit for the site. which goes into the erosion control, so they'll take a look at it as well. But we've met the requirements for the state and feel comfortable that erosion control will be very well maintained on the site, based on the plans and stuff we're showing in front of you. The last comment I believe there was a comment about stormwater detention. I'm not sure if that person's here or not, but the comment was basically that subsurface detention is what's recommended or required in a lot of areas. That is not the case. We use surface ponds here because we thought it was the best practical measure to use. Typically, subsurface retention and detention systems are used to maximize building areas because land is costly. So the more development you can get, the more you put. And these subsurface systems are put under parking lots and around buildings and everything like that to maximize the development footprint. Toll Brothers came in with a very good design in terms of layout and density, and instead of putting more homes on the site, they provided ponds, and it was just a better, prudent way to do it. They also won't be eyesores. They are going to be with a wetland a mix design on seed mix. So it's going to be a dry pond. It's not going to be full of water all the time. So these ponds won't be like people think with cattails and everything popping out of them. These will be dry basins that'll look more like a nice meadow than anything else. So hope that answers the questions we had. I would also note that the third-party review engineer did come in with their letter of recommendation or review of the site. Very positive, was appreciative of that. There were 2 notes that were requested to be on the site plans, which in general we don't have an issue with, but I know Joe did want to touch on that a little bit in terms of one of his comments on that. So unless you have further questions for me, that really sums up the revisions and modifications that we've been making to this site plans.
Do folks have immediate questions now? We will definitely reserve the right to call you back when we think of that question. Of course.
I do.
We do have one.
Yeah, actually, for the record, I have one comment and one question, Mr. Commissioner.
Go right ahead.
So my comment is, first, thank you for your consideration on connecting the sidewalks. That was, I think I'm on record as one of the commissioners that was pressing for that last meeting. And in terms of safety and connectivity, I think it's perfect. So I appreciate that. That's my comment. My question is, in terms of dust mitigation, and this is more for the record than anything else, if one of our residents comes back and says during the construction their house happened to be covered as a result of a dust cloud or a plume or something like that nature, would you guys be willing to power wash or clean the house in some way just so we can, appease that particular resident?
I mean, that would be a question for you guys.
Sure. Mike Samola, Senior Land Development Manager with Toll Brothers. I mean, if a house was covered and there was a complaint, we would investigate it. And, in the past, we have washed homes. I mean, we wouldn't say we're gonna commit to washing every home right now.
Fair.
But we would investigate it.
And consider it.
Yes.
Fair, for the record. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Mr. Zamola, could you sign in just
Mr.
briefly?
Chairman.
I'll do that.
Okay.
Anything else? Any other questions at the moment? or-
I actually had a question, but if it's easier if I wait until later, I wasn't sure how you want to.
I don't want you to lose, if you have a thought in your mind, I know that I'm now, occasionally they escape my mind if I wait too long.
Right. My question was, so following up on what my brother commissioner pointed out regarding the sidewalks, it was also my concern, and I thank you for raising that. That was my concern upon watching the hearing, and I appreciate that y'all are modifying for that purpose, and I understand the point about the north side. Maybe we'll get there someday. My question is whether or not, I see that the sidewalk and the adjacent property to the west, on the southwest side of Bradley Road, that commercial property that ends, there's a parking lot surrounding it. And so my question is whether or not, is there gonna be, there isn't gonna be, I'm hopeful that you're gonna tell me that there isn't gonna be any kind of gap between where that property ends and where this property begins. Because looking at it from like the Google Maps view, I see that there's a small, could be like 10, 15 feet wide piece of land that looks like they're mowing, at least from the Google Maps aerial view. So I guess you're gonna tell me, hopefully you're gonna tell me,
I mean, graphically on the plans right now, we show it going to their driveway.
Okay.
So it does extend the whole way.
great, great, yeah. I just don't wanna see any gaps. I want this to be as walkable as possible. And then that concern regarding the fencing that a resident who is adjacent raised, when I'm looking at the plans, and I was looking at the plans and I see this, the 30-foot setback as required. And I think I was just kind of concerned about the way that when she expressed it, I was concerned for her, right? So the adjacent properties along the southernmost portion of the parcel end, you know, at wherever that property line is, right? If I'm looking at your map here, there's a 30-foot setback between their property line, the end of their property line. So the end of that person's yard, they look out their window, the end of their yard, and then there's 30 feet. Oh, I just touched the mic, sorry about that. And then, is this accurate to show that then like the back of, say, you know, units 19 all the way down to, you know, 5, right? 5 to 19 in that stretch, right? So they all have like a small backyard.
The goal, what's shown here and what we're proposing is the 30-foot setback is for buildings, it's not for the fence.
Right.
So we have the fence, and this might have to change a little bit based on existing trees. Obviously, the goal would be to maintain as many of the trees back there as possible. They haven't been marked out, and, you know, that might change a little bit. So the fence might meander a little bit. If anything, it would get closer to these properties, I would to the proposed buildings.
Okay.
But we tried to show it as close as possible, just so, you know, we could show roughly where we thought it was gonna be. But if there's like a 20-inch maple or something that's right here, and we
Right.
need to bump it out, then it might meander a little bit.
So
But
that person and the other people who live in those properties look out their back window, the end of their property, whether there's a fence, whether they have a fence or not, they're gonna see another fence then that's,
correct.
Right,
If
it's
they
just
have a
one
on the
fence.
property line,
Yeah.
there would be another fence, and there'd be.
Right.
I don't know if there are those, I didn't go to look, but, if
Sure.
there were any, there would be tandem fences that would happen.
right. Oh, so it's just one that's being put up on this.
Yeah, we're only proposing this one fence that's probably 10 to 15 feet off of the property line, and so they're
Gotcha.
getting essentially viewership 10, 15 more feet that.
Gotcha, okay. Yeah, that was my, those were my questions, and you answered the other one about the stormwater retention, so, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Other, Commissioner Schatz?
On that
I'm not calling
topic-
you Brother Schatz.
Thank you. So I didn't bring my cheaters. I'm waiting for someone to drop them off so I can actually see what I wrote in my paper. But I have a note. It looks like something like unit 17 to 19, and I quote 30-foot easement. Was there less than that in 17 to 19?
No, there's 30 feet is the setback, the entire length of that rear piece.
So there's nothing for unit 17 to 19 specifically. Something unusual.
17 to 19, I don't believe so. I'm trying to think if there, I don't think there's anything particularly unique about that now.
Okay, I don't know why then and that was one. And then on the stormwater, the gentleman who brought it up commented that the last development, I can't read what I wrote, but I know in the last development prior to this one, it was included in the plans. And I understand your comment, you said it looked like more like a meadow than a pond. Why wouldn't you have it underground? What's the,
There's no reason to, it's more costly. It's easier to maintain one of these. Subsurface systems are great, like I said, when you're trying to maximize out a development and you're trying to, which the last development, I'm sure we can all agree did. They tried to make it as dense as possible, and because of that, they put their subsurface system wherever they could fit it. In this case, it is more cost efficient to do this. It's also easier to maintain. If sediment starts to build up in the sediment basins and wherever, it's easy to go out there and clear it out, and a couple guys out there with backhoes or whatever, and get the sediment out of there. When you have a subsurface system that starts to clog, if there's not a good deal of pre-treatment, vortexness or whatever you're gonna have as a pre-treatment measure, and they're not maintained, those systems can't fill with sediment and they're harder to clean, because you have to go into the pipes and go into stone layers and all that kind of stuff to get them clean.
so cost is the big one on your end.
From a design point, it doesn't matter.
And then,
It's
so,
on their side, yeah.
and then, the way it is now, there's in my mind, it's a retention pond. And then there's fencing around that,
Yeah, 6 foot, there's a 4-foot chain link fence that wraps all 3 ponds.
and then those 3 ponds are obstructed from, I'll say, public view by the 6-foot-high wood fence?
From the street, the 6-foot high fence is only here, so as you're on Bradley Road, you're gonna be able to see both those ponds, and it'll look like, it'll be a black vinyl fence, which kind of bleeds. You don't really see those that much, and it's only a 4-foot fence, so it bleeds into them when you drive by, you don't see as much as you would like a gray or something like that, but, it'll be a black vinyl fence, 4-foot high, and then it will slope down, it'll be like a meadow, it'll be like a meadowy grass that's in there. It won't be cattails and tall things, it'll just be, it's called a meadow mix, so you'll get something that's a little bit more, and you'll wanna trim that every once in a while and everything, there's provisions for that, so, it's not designed to be, you're not gonna see like dirty, like, you know, so I know what the concern is and how these things end up looking when they're wet ponds that dry out and they're kind of like mucky on the bottom and stuff like that. The goal is not to have that. We're providing pre-treatment, we're providing 7 and 4 bays, and they're able to be maintained and cleaned on a periodic basis as needed.
So after the full development's done, then the HOA takes over, they have to maintain it periodically with the same treatments and stuff you just mentioned?
And that's in the maintenance plan.
Okay, and then why isn't, again, this is so foreign to me, so why isn't it a breeding ground for mosquitoes?
I mean, typically some mosquitoes, from my understanding, need like a 30-inch stagnant pond or something like that, and that's more apt to happen. If this were full all the time, that could happen, but it's a dry pond, so they'll dry out in there. If there's little puddles that were mean or something, the puddle might become something like that, but I don't think it's gonna be anything drastic, that I'm aware of.
And
It's not my expertise on mosquitoes.
me neither. And finally, you mentioned this plan that you're proposing is approved by whom from the state?
I said we're going to be submitting to the state. As part of this, since we're over 5 acres, we need to submit to get a stormwater general permit. So this will be submitted to them as well, and there's a whole process that goes through that.
And the collection ponds are specifically part of that plan that goes to the state?
All these plans will go.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, following up on that, if you don't mind, in the previous hearing, there was some discussion, and because you're not wearing a mic, I couldn't exactly follow, but at one point, there was a discussion about this being an area that seems rather low-lying, and that you know, in the event of a future or a present in which we're getting, you know, massive kinds of storms, that the drainage there seems like might be a place where you would expect some flooding. And I think you made a comment about the type of soil that is generally around there. So is that something that, I mean, obviously you're standing behind this, but I know that, like, particularly with the area around that whole general area, I think as a resident, I have this impression that I know there have been floods, you know, not too far from there, literally yards away. Obviously, we have a river and whatnot. So I just wanted to ask you to clarify for that a little bit. I mean, obviously, I heard your presentation, you know, about stormwater management, and I trust that, you know, as an engineer, you're certifying it. But it does seem to me like one of the primary concerns, as adjacent landowners might have, right? We see periodically lawsuits, right, where the town approves a development on whatever part of town, not necessarily down in the Woodbridge Commons, AKA the flats, right? And then we see landowners who are adjacent. I mean, you see this in every town, but, you know, we have seen that. So I'd like to avoid that if possible. So if you could just flesh that out for me a little bit more.
Yeah, so in general, like I said in the last hearing, the site currently, I'd say right around here, drains fully this year. So our goal is, we can't obviously discharge on containers, obviously we don't want us doing that, and we wouldn't want to do it either. So we're taking virtually all this and taking it to these ponds. That's why this pond is large, because we're taking it in the opposite direction of where it currently drains. Material out there, we have gone out there and done perk tests. It's actually a very well drained soil, especially when you get down to the bottom of these ponds. It's almost like gravelly material, so they percolate really well. So we're limited by going up to 5 inches per hour with our infiltration rates. We're limited to go up to 5 inches per hour for our infiltration rates. That's a state requirement. You know, it's a recommendation, but we adhere to those recommendations with Connecticut Deep. And DOT, but we designed ours 4 inches per hour, because at the time we did our design, we were basing it on our visuals of the soil, but we hadn't done a perk test yet. We've since done them, and they're much better than we expected. So we could amend our drain report to go up to 5 inches per hour if we wanted to, and get better perk rates out there. But we kept it at 4 for now, and we feel comfortable that that'll be enough, and the soil will be really well drained. Because like I said, there's a lot of storage in this pond, and that has a lot of volume, and it will drain really well. And the actual performance of these basins will be much better than what our design is for, so it's almost like a factor of safety is this design. We're only using 4 inches per hour right now.
Okay.
When we were getting measurements that were around 40 in some places.
Sure.
So it's really working well. So these ponds should perform better than design, so I'm encouraged by that, but I don't know if that answers your question, or if there's something else.
You know, it's really about my education and the public's education about that, so, yeah,
Yeah, so we take these things seriously. Obviously, our goal is not to have, I mean, for anyone that's getting runoff down drainage right now, you know, like I said, most of the stuff does drain this way. There is vegetative there's a little belly here, so it might not all get there. It probably infiltrates really well there now, so they don't likely see a lot of runoff from the hillside.
Sure.
But the goal is to not add to that way, obviously, so we reduce the amount of runoff going that direction considerably. And where we're taking it, we're getting a lot of infiltration, mitigating it that way.
Okay, and as designed, the individual townhouses are gonna drain with just sort of, I remember from the view of from the packet, right? For just standard gutters that run down to liters, et cetera, and those will drain into the yards, or will there be?
They're actually hard piped, so.
Oh, there, okay. That's what I thought, but I couldn't,
I mean, we haven't designed to that level in terms of, what exactly they're going to do, but we've accounted for in our design. Each one of these, like this building, you'll see on both sides, the nuclears are coming down in blue, and they're all connecting to this system here.
Sure.
These guys are tying here, so they're all hard piped to the storm drainage system, and that's part of the water quality line we talk about, when we say this ponds are sized for the water quality volume, and then make all that flow and all that impervious surface is included in the design, and part of the pipe sizing and all that stuff.
okay. And there's no basement, so we don't have a sump pump question.
Right.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Any questions for this?
I'm sorry, I have one more.
Right ahead. No, this is our
No,
opportunity.
So, no, because I think you bring valid points. Obviously, from at least this side of the table, there's some trepidation around the stormwater process. And, you know, it's incumbent upon us, and as commissioners, that we want to protect the town and our residents as much as possible. So my question is, does Toll Brothers currently have a site, a model property with similar systems that we can Google Map, take a look at, that's
I don't.
built and developed right now?
Well, I'll have to sort of pause there.
Yeah.
Our decision on this can only be done based on the record that's in front of us
Fair
at this
enough.
hearing.
Fair
so
enough.
I was
we,
gonna say,
Fair enough.
I don't think, I haven't designed one before. I know we've done wet ponds with Toll Brothers before. I don't think they've done a dry pond. I don't think they've done dry ponds or not. Okay. I don't have any personal experience, so I couldn't talk on that. Like, we've designed some wet ponds that are the ones we were talking about that are more prone to have the cattails and things like that, and other locations, and those work great, but, this, I don't have any dry pond.
Sure. Based on the commissioner's comments, I think we need to deal with the information that's in front of us now, so.
It would be an FOI.
Yeah, FOI issue, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I'll have one minor sort of addition, that series of hard pipes. If I do recall, those also are infiltrating on their way to the pond.
Yeah, that's one of the lines, so this run of pipe back here, so this point where it's called an out control structure, this is all flat, oversized perforated pipes with providing additional storage, and we have re-perforates down there as well. So this is taking the roof leaders and any overland flow to this line, so it's not taking a considerable amount of flow, but that's what's gonna be infiltrating back there, so you'll be getting water quality for the roof areas and things like that as well. But yes, these pipes, these roof leaders are tying into the structures along that run, so there's a series of area drains or catch basins behind these units that capture the overland flow, and these roof leaders tie into those structures.
And that's again, your analysis of the soil type. This is well draining soil. So every bit of water that you are
What's
allowing,
in those pipes is gonna perk well.
and when you say perk for our, percolate through the soil. Yes.
And this outlet control structure is designed to be like a weir wall, which is this water will back up throughout those 24-inch pipes, so it'll fully fill before it tops the weir wall, so all that water will infiltrate into the ground.
Thank you. Other questions before we pivot to the traffic? I believe that was next on your agenda. Unless, did we want to stay on the stormwater with our town engineer? I just want to know what's most reasonable in sequencing. I'll ask our town consultant if would you rather wait till after they're done, or would you like to weigh in on anything now?
We can wait if you'd like.
Okay, so we'll wait. We'll let you continue.
Thank you. I was going to make one brief comment about the gentleman's memo, and I don't want to forget to do it later, so however you want to slice this up is fine with me, Mr. Chairman, but just so I don't forget to say it, the memo from Mr. Preddy at Chris Colo found that the plans were very well thought out. The stormwater calculations are acceptable. We appreciate all that, as Eric said. And we take no issue with the two comments or recommendations that are made in the memo. I just want to make one technical, and forgive me, it's a somewhat lawyerly comment about the first one. The gist of the first comment is basically make the stormwater management measures permanent and recorded on the land records. And of course, we have no problem with that. And my comment is, it would be appropriate, I think, and it would be typical for the commission, if you were otherwise inclined to approve the application, you can make it a condition of your approval that the stormwater measures as he wrote it are permanent and they cannot be abandoned, left in disrepair, et cetera, without the consent of the town. Put that in the special exception approval document. We'll record it on the land records. That's when, by state statute, it becomes effective. So I wanted to differentiate that concept from his last sentence where it says, recommended this be also filed in the deed of record for the parcel. That's the part I would ask you not to require us to do, because stormwater is not really a title issue that you would put in the deed to the property. But like I said, it is entirely appropriate from a zoning perspective to include that in a special exception approval, which does get recorded on the land records and it achieves the same result. So that's my request on that. And so we are now ready to turn to Mr. Wamser and talk about traffic.
Good evening, everybody, and thanks for your time. I am Tom Wamser. I'm a traffic engineer at Ty & Bond, and I'm a licensed professional engineer, professional traffic operations engineer, road safety professional, level 2 infrastructure. So first thing I'd like to do is run through a comment response document that you should all have in front of you, which is follow along with that. These are comments that we received from DM engineers, peer reviewer, on September 1st. So I'd just like to, for the sake of the record, go through each of these and acknowledge our responses to them. So comment number 1 was to extend the study area. You can see that behind me here in the picture, to include the intersections at Eber and Bradley Road with Route 16.
And if you could tilt the microphone a little closer to you, does that help our folks in the back?
Just the red button.
Any better?
Perfect, thank you.
No problem. So, to extend the study area to include the intersections at either end of Bradley Road, that being at Route 69 and at Route 63. So, here's noting that we have done that. Comment number 2 was acknowledging the validity of the existing background traffic volumes that we used on Bradley Road. Methodology used to determine them from the 2019 CTDOT TMC data that we used to curl up to the 2022 existing conditions. It also acknowledges the validity of using a conservative 1% background growth rate. The third comment we received was about the collision history, extending this to include the 5-year period to include the period before the COVID-19 pandemic. We've also done that. They also comment to the specifics on where the crashes occurred and how many there were, and there was public comment about that last time. So just to go into more detail, this extends to comment number 4 as well on the locations. There were 2 crashes that occurred on Bradley Road in the area of the site. However, at the intersections on either end of Route 69 and Route 63, there were, Route 69 there were 24 crashes, and at Route 63, they're 28. And again, this is over a 5.5-year period, so they're typical numbers. They're not especially high. It's less than 5 per year. So they're acknowledging in their comments that there's not a significant pattern that was of any sort of concern for improving this development. Moving on to comment number 5 is on trip generation. So with this approach, there's also public comment on questioning the source of where this information comes from. So we just wanted to be extremely thorough in our approach, and you'll see some attached tables near the end of the documentation in front of you that really lays out pretty much every possible scenario to give you as much information that you could form your decision on as you could feasibly need. So the comment number 5 specifically recommends looking at similar land uses that are not age restricted, just to get an idea of what those developments generate compared to what our age restricted development would. So the 2 land uses that we refer to are 215 single family attached housing and 220 multifamily housing low rise. So these trip generation volumes can be seen in figure 2-B near the back of the packet you have in front of you. And if you look at those volumes, you'll notice that they are higher, as you would expect for a development that's not age restricted, but they're not inordinately higher. For example, 30 in the morning goes up to either 34 or 45, depending on the development. And the afternoon similarly goes from 34 up to 40 and 51. And there's a piece of information I just want to highlight here for this is that we analyzed the peak hour, so that's a 60-minute period. Really, the peak period of the day is longer than that. So there will be more people commuting in the morning and the afternoon. It's just over a longer period of time. So that's why you see the peak being less than what some people expected. Looking at 70 units, possibly up to 2 cars per unit at maximum occupancy. They expected higher numbers. So I just wanted to emphasize the validity of those numbers comparing to developments that have, with land uses that have even more generation, still don't meet that high number there. So move on to number 6. Not recommended analyzing hour of the generator. So what we have done is the peak hour of the adjacent street. And basically we said we were going to look at how the traffic operates when the Bradley Road intersections are at their maximum volume from surrounding traffic. Peak hour generator, on the other hand, is looking at when the development itself generates the most traffic down the road, which may or may not coincide with the adjacent street's peak. So for the sake of being thorough, we did take those numbers and we ran them through our models. We don't believe these numbers are realistic, but they are higher, so they give an even more conservative approach. So that is in figure table 2-C, sorry. You can see on that one that volumes go from 30 and 34 in volume and afternoon respectively to 55 and 74. And running those numbers through the analyses, you can see the results of the following tables, which are tables 3 and 4, 3 for capacity, 4 for queues. And similarly, the impact is not significant. These intersections should continue to operate similar to how they do today or in background conditions. And that's with the conservative approach of seeing more traffic than we believe will be generated. Comment number 7 is related to capacity analysis. The recommendation to extend it to the adjacent intersections, which again, as mentioned, comment number 1 we have done. Following comment number 8. It's about the Bradley Road Route 69 intersection, which I have just touched on in the previous comments. They acknowledge BM that it operates acceptably at low service, A in the morning and C in the afternoon, which are good operations. Comment number 9 talks about Route 63, which is the unsignalized intersection to the west. They concur with our analysis results, noting that there's, for queue analysis, only one additional vehicle for the maximum queue length for both the morning and the afternoon with our development. They also mentioned the should also mention that there are other paths that vehicles can take. We conservatively assume an even distribution at every movement, regardless of how much the delay might be. So if a vehicle really wants to avoid the delay, they are able to use the traffic signal and get around the network effectively that way without incurring more delay. They also acknowledge some limitations to the highway capacity software. It's the realisticness of the results comparing it to what they observed for their independent field review, which is similar to our observations of seeing vehicles queue up 3 to 4 vehicles and delays not exceeding 2 minutes. Okay, so moving on to comment number 10, about the site plan. That was touched on earlier. It's about comment number 10 and 11 about the site plan. The signs, which we have corrected on the site plan. And then comment number 11 is about extending the sidewalks, which again, we had mentioned that earlier, extending to Route 69 and down to the south, connecting to the church. Finally, the comment number 12 was just about highlighting their main recommendations for being very thorough in the trip generation analysis and looking at each possible way that we could generate trips for this development. It just gives you, again, information that you might need to understand how these sort of developments generate traffic in comparison to what we're proposing to be the case for our estimates here. So that does it for the comments from the end. I would also just like to run through a couple other minor elements from last time that was questions raised by the commission or by the public. One was on speed. So I looked through the data that we collected, which was an automatic traffic recorder on Bradley Road in the area of site frontage, to look at the maximum speeds that we obtained over a 5 to 6 day period. And there was one car exceeding 45 miles per hour but not reaching 50. That was the maximum that we saw there. So we didn't find significant high-end speeding. The 85th percentile, which is considered the operating speed of the road, we got at 34 miles per hour. And another thing that works in our favor here is the very good sight distances from the proposed driveway. So they meet the requirements for that 34 mile per hour design speed, and that's the requirements that CTDOT puts forth. But exceeding those requirements means it's an even safer condition, which should allow for safe access and egress to the site. Additionally, development may actually have the impact where currently the area is pretty open, and once you build things, drivers, their psychology tends to decrease speed. So trip generation, I also want to give a little bit more background information on that. The methodology is based on the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Handbook. That's the industry standard to be used. The end acknowledges that. I just want to give background on what that source is. So it's a conglomeration of data available from similar sites from across the country. So a large number of them are compiled into one source. Averages are taken from them where you can get various rates and equations based on the size of your development to determine what the generation will be from that development. So we use land use code 251, which we thought was most appropriate for this development, and it's validated by industry standard and by the large number of samples that it's collected from. So I'd be happy to take any questions now.
Could you do one other thing, please? Because you included a table 2A about traffic from the previous approval. And I don't know if and the commission hasn't seen that yet. I don't know if they understand what that's doing in there. Could you just explain that?
Yep, absolutely. So it starts with table 2, which is the previous site generated traffic that we estimated that we presented at the last hearing. And included table 2-A, which is just a comparison to show what the previously approved development at this location had prepared. You can see is significantly higher, 4 to 6 times larger trip generation in the morning and afternoon depending. The maximum is 122 for the morning and 215 in the afternoon, compared to the morning where you go back to table 2. In the morning we have 30 and in the afternoon we have 34. So the impact from this development is significantly less than it used to be in the previous approval.
So conversely, what we're proposing is 4 to 6 times less traffic than what was already approved on this site.
Correct.
Commission members, do you have questions on traffic? Rob, did you have one or no? Rob?
No.
That was a no. That wasn't a yes. Yoni, did you have a question?
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, my takeaway from your presentation and from following along as best I could on this is that it is your, the opinion of Ty Bond that even with the augmented, enlarged, changed study areas that were recommended, that everything in the plan as submitted by Toll Brothers for this site meets or exceeds any standards required by the state, by, the Association of Traffic Engineers or whatever the association that you mentioned, right? That's your takeaway. That's the takeaway we should take from this September 6th letter.
Yes.
Am I right to, okay.
Yes. That's right.
And then, and the other question that I had, so just looking at the map that's behind you, right, those two orange lines that are in the parcel, right, that on the one on the left, that's the entry for the southern portion, and then the one on the right is the entry. Are there forgive me if you mentioned this, but are there gates in either entry, like is the entry and exit to both north and south, is that controlled by anything other than, like, I don't know, maybe like a key card entry or something for residents? Like, what's the anticipated, do you know?
Somebody from the site team could correct me, but I don't believe there's any restrictions at the driveways.
No, there are not.
Okay. I was just thinking literally about, people coming in and out, and what you were saying about traffic coming down from Amity Road, pressing on that accelerator at, 6:30 in the morning, and then someone coming out of the development very slow, obviously, coming out to turn right to go towards 69, and then I was just trying to think through a real world scenario. I mean, one of the comments that the public, a member of the public who's a resident nearby, a couple of people who, I think one gentleman lives actually on 69, he doesn't live on, the road to the south, but he was talking about the need for traffic calming measures. It sounded to me like he was talking more about the need for traffic calming on, or traffic management on 69, which I believe might be a state road, but somebody correct me if I'm wrong. And same thing with 63, both of those are.
Correct.
I didn't hear that Bradley Road itself, it becomes like a really bad place for people really try to floor it and get the maximum. Like, it doesn't seem to make sense for me to do that, for people to do that, although they do. I mean, I'm 45 now, but maybe when I was young and fresh and had a V6 engine and just floored it, it just doesn't seem like something somebody would do. And then, like you said, once there's development there, people seem less inclined to do that. But as to traffic calming, is it, I'm not asking you for you to give us like a set of recommendations, but I'm just curious, is there something that I can't think of anything else that we could possibly do or require that would require traffic calming around that parcel. I don't see it when I've driven there, and I don't see it when I'm looking at it, but when I hear residents articulate that they wish there was traffic calming, I'm personally at a loss as to what we could possibly do there. I feel like Toll Brothers would probably recommend something if they had something in mind, but I mean, you do say in this, I think on the second page of this, or maybe it's the third page, that based on the data, the state would not put a traffic light at the intersection of 63 Bradley, right?
That's correct.
VN said that too, right?
Yes.
Right.
The end substantiated that.
Anyway, I realize that's not really so much of a point of question, but I'm trying to think about, again, what folks want in terms of traffic calming. If there's something I could see, I don't see anything.
Understood. If the town wanted to pursue traffic calming on their own, there's processes for doing that involving the whole neighborhood, of course, as it affects multiple people.
Right.
But as it pertains to this development, we didn't see any significant patterns that would suggest anything unsafe.
Sure. Thank you.
Other traffic related questions? So I do appreciate your response and the responses to the response and the inclusion of the tables in the back, which put your proposed development in comparison to what came before, and that you listened carefully to folks about those numbers of cars, the difference it would make if it were all single-family attached housing or multifamily housing or whatnot. So I'd appreciate the extra work that you've. Any other items before we ask our town consultant to come up?
You want me to just cover the age restriction part of it? It's pretty brief.
Sure.
You all had asked me some questions about how that works. Toll Brothers has built and sold 10 age-restricted communities in Connecticut, so it knows the process really well, better even than I do, but they're, just so you know, that they're experienced at doing it and have done so very successfully and had no problems with it. And it'll be the obligation long-term of the homeowners association to ensure compliance with the Fair Housing Act. But Toll Brothers, of course, in initially marketing the development and selling the units will be complying with the Fair Housing Act, which requires that at least 80% of the units will have at least one person living in them who is age 55 or older. So the law, as set forth by Congress, allows for, potentially over time, up to 20% of the units not to have that age restriction in them because of changes that happen with people dying or becoming divorced or whatever may happen. But initially, and throughout the life of the community, the requirement is, and I've seen some of the declaration language that Toll Brother uses for creating the homeowners associations, which then become the law of that property, there must be compliance with the Fair Housing Act, and the homeowners association needs to ensure that over time. But having said that, it will be the rule that Toll Brothers will put on the rules for the property, that no child under the age of 18 is allowed to live in any of the units. So that's 100% of the units for more than 3 months. So it's common that there's a provision where a grandchild can come and stay for a part of the summer or something like that, but not be a permanent resident. I think actually there was one other thing. And that the common language provides that if there is a person who qualifies on the basis of age living in a unit with a spouse or a partner, and if the spouse or partner divorces or survives the age qualified, meaning if the person 55 or over dies and they have a younger spouse living in the unit, that person is allowed to stay there as long as the community at all times maintains the 80% requirement for people who are 55 or older. And again, that's why Congress allows that 20% sort of flexibility there. But I think those were what you wanted to know, but if you have anything else on, I'm happy to answer it.
So what would happen in the event that the situation arises as you described, and that brought the number down to 79%? Would that person be compelled to sell the unit?
I'm not exactly sure what the homeowners association does to deal with it at that point, because there are HUD rules on this, and the compliance is with federal law, so the discussion really and the obligations are between the homeowners association and the federal government, HUD, and the U.S. Department of Justice. And HUD has rules on this that they've published, which I haven't mastered, but the requirement is that they can stay in the unit as long as 80% of the units are occupied. So if they fall under it, and the community needs to do something to bring it into compliance, either with the next unit, sometimes there's a little bit of time, that's allowed to catch up, or they need to have a discussion and work it out with the homeowner. But it's usually the homeowners association that cares very much. It's not typically something a town gets involved in trying to enforce or to manage, because it's the responsibility of the homeowners association to maintain that exemption, because as I explained to you in the last hearing, it is an exemption from what would otherwise create liability, because you're not allowed to have a no children policy unless you have this 80% rule that you comply with. So the homeowners association has to take action and work it out. What exactly that would be, it depends on the circumstances.
Other questions from commission members?
So I had brought this up last time, and I think in your answer today was a little different than last time. I thought you said something to the effect, and I may have written my notes wrong, that when I asked about could there be people under 55, and you said something like it could be deeded in however the town or however the commission wanted it. So is that not the case? Let's say if someone said, well, I wanted it at 82.5%, I don't want it at 80%. Is there something in the federal law that says 80 is the magic number? Could it be 90, could it be 95, could it be 100?
It's a minimum of 80 for federal law.
So, okay, but it could be 90 or 100, and who ultimately decides it?
Well, as I said, this is usually not something that the towns get involved in mandating that somebody go over, above and beyond what the Fair Housing Act requires, and I don't think it's a good idea, honestly. But ultimately, it's between whoever is the property owner. In this situation, legally, it's the homeowners association because it's responsible for the overall compliance of the property, and it owes that compliance to the federal government, and the state government has a similar Fair Housing Act as well.
So regarding the children comment, is that part of the deed, or is that part of the HOA docs? Where does it end up saying that children?
It's in the HOA declaration.
And can they change that?
No.
So once it's in there, it's set in stone for the life of the property.
Well, I'm not a condo expert, so I don't want to speak to how all the rules work, if it can ever be amended. Let me, there's a little bit on the back of this that I think says something about that. Comply with the HUD rules. I'm not sure if the declaration can ever be amended, honestly.
And the 80% rule is
Not in
the
a way
only,
that doesn't comply with the Fair Housing Act, of course. I mean,
so
that
the
goes without
80% rule is the only way that you can not only age restrict on the upside, but also prevent people from below a threshold from living there as well for more than 3 months.
Right.
Okay.
There's two exemptions in the Fair Housing Act. One is if you have 80% of the units have somebody 55 or over living in it. The other is 100% of the units have somebody 62 and over. So we're using the 55 and over exemption.
Okay.
Okay,
Other
that-
questions?
That's it for us.
I do have one question. I don't think, it's not relevant to the 55 plus declaration. You said that the units were going to be just shy of 2,000 square feet to 2,600 square feet, and that the prices were going to be market value. Do you have a rough idea of what the price points are going to be on these?
No. Can either of you guys answer that right now?
I mean, you must have some idea.
Not at this point, it's, we're projecting a few years out from opening for sale, so it's,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
We'll need you either. Come to the
The
mic.
actual sale of the units is a couple of years away, so no, we don't have a price that we expect them to be offered for, because it'll be dictated by the market at the time they're going onto the market.
Okay, but you don't even have a vague idea, 300,000, 400,000, 500,000, 600,000,
Not that
where they'd fall?
Not that I can quote you at this time, no.
I'll ask a different question. So you mentioned there were 10 or so other Toll Brothers developments in the Connecticut that are these similar types of 55 and older developments. Do you have estimates of the sales price of, let's say, the ones that were built most recently? Or
No.
from the Toll Brothers team? I'm asking you, but I'm probably directing it to your Toll Brothers team.
On different properties in different towns?
Understood. Yep. Which is, we'll have all those caveats that they're apples and oranges and et cetera.
it's all public, anything that's been sold by the toll others, it's public knowledge, and, you can pull up in the last year's Zillow for Danbury and that whole thing.
They mean that we know off the top of our heads. Guess not. Nope, sorry.
Okay.
Where are the, to Rob's point, where are the other developments that you guys have done in Connecticut? What towns?
Danbury, Bethel, Newtown.
We'll have you,
Prospect.
yeah, well, if you could come in and sign in and go through our process and come up to a microphone. Thank you. And I apologize that I don't remember your name from,
Jason Dowd with Toll Brothers.
Thank you.
We've completed communities, resales for those communities can all be found until a realtor or MLS.
Unfortunately,
Except by us.
we can't do that. We can only take the information that we're receiving here in this public hearing process.
Some of those have been completed a few years ago, but, you know, you're anywhere from 500,000 to over $1 million, depending on the size of those units, the community. Some of those are single family, some of those are detached, some of those are 2 over 2. So you have a wide range of product, wide range of towns, you know, wide range of sizes.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Other questions? Thank you. I think now we'll bring up our town consultant. So thank you very much to the applicant. Stay put because we are, just in case we have any last questions before we close the hearing, we want to reserve the right to ask a follow-up before we can't ask follow-ups anymore. But James Preddy, thank you for joining us. And if you could introduce yourself. I don't think we've had the pleasure of meeting before. If you could introduce yourself.
It's been a while since I've actually been at one of these meetings. Introduction, James Brady, professional engineer and licensed surveyor, School of Engineering, at 420 East Main Street, Branford. As I've said in the letter, I thought the plans were generally very good. My comments were basically geared toward the question on maintenance I brought before. I do agree with their engineer that the above ground, the open systems are the better way to go. The underground systems are very difficult to maintain, in my experience. And when all of us are not paying attention in the future, it's a problem sometimes before anybody realizes it. When they're open and conspicuous, somebody sees the problem and it gets maintained more rapidly. And then the comment about recording the records is fine if it's in the special exhibit. It just, that comment is just making it so that it's searchable at some point in the future. Somebody will come across it if they're going to search that property. That's all that's really about. But the other, otherwise, I didn't have any real problems with the plan. My first question was about traffic, and then Christine said that someone else was already reviewing that, so. I'll
Great.
answer any questions.
Thank you. Commission members, do you have questions for our consultant?
No.
I had one and then it disappeared, which happens more often than I like to admit. I do appreciate the helpful or the recognition of the challenge of things that are underground, harder to see, harder to maintain. But I do remember my question. Do you have any experience with the dry pond versus the wet pond? And is there anything that we should be aware of or of anything of concern, one versus the other?
Again, any system designed work perfect on paper, but if it's not maintained, it's no different. The outlets need to be cleared of debris on a regular basis, and you know, a couple times a year you need to mow down the woody vegetation that's in the way. But their notes kind of handle most of that. Again, it's just making sure that someone is watching in the future and actually doing the maintenance. That's the key. But we've designed both. More often than not, they're dry. Nobody really wants the wet pond unless you're adjacent to body of water and it's providing some other function. But yeah, they especially when you have good soils in the lower levels, they work well.
Great. Any other questions? No. Thank you very much for your review and for your report.
Actually,
Oh, wait. Oh, there's one. Sorry.
I just wanted to clarify something that I didn't the Criscuolo Engineering letter of August 25th, the memorandum, right? So the stuff that's on the second page, after stormwater management, I guess it goes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's all been substantially addressed, and I apologize if I missed something from the last meeting, which I did watch, but the concerns, like, for example, the concerns that you raised under the general section, have those been,
I'm not sure that you're looking at
it's the August 25th one, so there may be a newer letter.
August 29th.
August 29th, that's probably why. I see.
Oh,
That may have been,
the 25th was for inland wetlands,
Okay.
correct?
Oh, that's for, you know what, that's not for this application. That's probably why. It could be why. Helps to look at the title, the to from. All right, cancel that. Thank you.
I missed that too. What you need. Any last,
No, I'm gonna, if it's okay, I'm gonna stay though.
appreciate it. So, Chris, I think next should we
Public.
move to our public, terrific. So, thank you again to the applicants, stay put. We haven't closed the public hearing yet. And now it is time for our public comment portion on the Toll Brothers application only. And for members of the public, this public hearing is for the purpose of listening to your comments. You will each have up to 3 minutes for brief statements for the record, and I will use my phone for timing purposes. So just so you know, as always, our TPC members and the applicants will not be answering the questions that you may raise directly. And your public statements and any written comments that were submitted to the town are part of the public record for our TPC's consideration of this application. So as a friendly reminder to everyone, off-the-record communication with a member of the commission on the merits of this application is prohibited, and I appreciate the folks that have not done that. So please, when you come up to the microphone, keep your comments brief and focused on the application itself, and try to avoid unreasonable repetition so we can hear all the concerns that you and your neighbors may have. So I invite members of the public now to come up to the table, sign in, and introduce yourself just for public comment on the Toll Brothers application. Welcome. If you could sign in, right, Chris, and state your name for the record while I get my timer going.
Hi, my name is Michelle Riley. I live directly behind the project. I live on Landon Street. I was here at the last meeting, and I would like to reiterate my same concerns from last time. I unfortunately was late from getting out of work today to miss the beginning of the meeting, but the traffic study, so I left this morning at 7:15, tried to get out of Landon Street on Litchfield Turnpike. It took me 15 minutes. That's before this project. I know there was many traffic studies that looked into this, and I think last time, if I'm not mistaken, it was an increase of 10 cars. That's impossible. If there are 70 units, and most of them will be dual occupied by 55 and older, do you know many, I'm gonna say the same thing I said last time, do you know a lot of people who are retired at 55 and don't go to work and commute on a regular basis? I don't think that is a realistic indication of what this project will do to the traffic and congestion in that area. I also believe that 70 units is too many. And I'm also aware that the first proposal, years and years ago, that was approved was double that. I think that's ridiculous, and I don't think that this 70 units should be compared to that first application and that approval, because that would never have been okay. And I think 70 units and that increased population is too many. I'm also concerned about the construction phase, living directly behind the project, and what that would look like for us, and what that is going to do to our backyards and the noise levels. I understand it's dual zoned. I take a lot of pride in my yard and have a great backyard, and I'm not looking forward to having construction 8 months, I think, is also unrealistic. But I really wish the town would consider these concerns and really, really think hard about this project and whether or not it's doable for the town. And thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Other members of the public who would like to comment? Thank you for coming forward. If you could sign in and please state your name for the record.
Absolutely. Diane Urbano. I'm a resident of the town, and I am an owner of 245 Amity Road, which abuts one side of this project. First, I appreciate how this commission is vetting this process. I'm impressed with it. I'm also appreciative that a company as Toll Brothers is interested in a project in our town. I understand what this woman said to me previous. It's interesting. I speak both as a resident and then as a property owner of a commercial piece. And I could tell you on one hand, the commercial piece, worry why there isn't more traffic. Because there are these two peak times, and if you're commuting, it is bad. But the rest of the time, we want more. And I feel that the district needs more housing for it to be vital. I love the idea of the connected sidewalks. Everyone down there will. So there's that. The thing I think that this woman brought up, which is right, it's sort of that the waiting is the hardest part. I don't know with these studies, traffic studies, if time is taken into account. The biggest argument that we hear is making the lefts and making the right, and even at a research drive, the time it takes. So if it's 30 cars, which to me, that like part of me wishes there was more, but what does that mean to the commuter in terms of time? How much, and also to the businesses, deliveries and all of that. And so I hope that you do approve this project, but I would hope that you take into this concern seriously about the time, wait, and access. It's important, and maybe consider the lights, consider everything you can as members of the town and making people feel very comfortable with this project. There's one other question I have. It's probably been regarding the storm sewer system. I think we have a 50-year system there. I don't remember. I think it's 50. Previous, it was 100-year for this. I don't know what they're required for. But I know a little bit about the system that they're considering, and I feel confident it's a fine way to go. And regarding the resident aspect, I worry about our taxes. They're really high. They prevent businesses from coming. They hurt developers because they impact, profit. And so this seems like in so many ways ideal from a tax perspective. It's a self-contained community. Yes, it's 55 up. We wish younger people were here, but the 55 up is important for the tax situation. It doesn't impact the way individual homes does, or quite honestly, the apartments would. And so from that standpoint, as a resident, I hope it happens, and I hope the town's smart enough to take it as a way to reduce taxes and to move forward with the great changes you've made to open up housing, that we get more diverse housing and get younger people here as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait a minute.
Any other members of the public on the Toll Brothers application? Chris, did we receive any
Not on this.
written comments?
Only the comments that you got from your experts or their responses.
Appreciate that. Any last questions from members of the commission before we close this hearing? We don't have the opportunity to ask any last questions. Alrighty, seeing none, so do we need a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the closure? Seeing none.
You need to seat one of your alternates,
Just one?
just one, because there's 5 other regular members here.
Who are our alternates?
The 2 ladies.
It's your choice.
Choose carefully.
So
It's a crucial vote, too.
Kathy will be,
Okay.
well, Kathy will be seated for the entirety of it. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none. So that public hearing is closed. Chris, could we move to our work session on this so we can?
I believe that you should continue to your next hearing. You've had people waiting over an hour for a hearing that hasn't started.
Okay. Then we will do that. Anyone need a bathroom break, a bio break on the commission? Water break? All right.
You want everything.
All of our commission members and to the applicants. Public for their participation in the process, which was appreciated. So I'd now like to open the public hearing for Luciani Properties LLC for 110 Luciani Road for a special exception permit according to section 3.3N of the regulations of the town of Woodbridge for the excavation, removal, filling, grading, and processing of earth products to construct 2 single-family homes. Who would like to begin for the applicant? Thank you. Wait, hold on one second. If you could wait till you're at the microphone, introduce yourself. Do we need a different sign-in sheet or the same sign-in sheet works, Chris? And we'll pause for one moment while we close the door.
This is agenda 2.
Yep, that is agenda item 2. So if you could introduce yourself, say your name for the record, and then you can begin your presentation.
I'm Derek Owasowitz, representing Luciani LLC for 110 excavation permit, Luciani Road.
Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah, so we got some comments from the engineer. I'm not sure, I believe you guys probably already went over it. The
No,
comments.
we haven't gone over it yet with our consultant.
Yeah, so we are looking to excavate the property so we could build 2 single-family homes as allowed by the current zoning regulations. And, you know, so this is the process. And we looked at the comments already. We don't see any real issues. Most of it is for the construction process when we'll be applying for the construction permits. At this time, I think one of the comments that we thought was kind of odd is hiring a tree professional to look at the site after or during. When we do these jobs, we have to take care of, first of all, the people that work for us to ensure their safety. And when we build a house, if there's any trees or anything, rock that was like that, we would never be able to insure the homes. We are having temporary fencing. I believe it's all on the site plan that was submitted. I see there was some things that were put in the right-of-way, the town right-of-way of the circle.
We could address that by putting an easement with a common driveway through the house that is located closest to, let's see, 108 Luciani Drive. We'd be achieving this work with heavy equipment and a hammer. We believe it'll take us about 1 month. The previous owner, I guess, did pull a building permit for the way the site is now. But on our investigation, he did not take out enough rock, I guess the way he was approved previously. There's also a few issues that I believe the prior zoning board knew about, and the zoning compliance officers. 108 Luciani is diverting water onto the property, which I believe is coming from maybe the aerial road properties. It seems to be like a swale and a river, probably with the rain we had. The current site that we own does not really have a water issue. It's just steep and grade. We put hay bales there. We were there 2-3 weeks ago, clearing the site of brush. The neighbors came out quite aggressively. I've spoken with, I guess Pete is the owner of 108. His deck is currently over the property line, which I believe the town has known about for quite some time. We're trying not to make it an issue, but it kind of is an issue, and try to bring it to the board's attention now. And I see there's some other comments of 115 Luciani Drive that I just got in regards to their basement leaks of water. I believe there was another gentleman on the other street, but I don't have, had the same when we were there, and the kind of the crowd came out in strong opposition to what we were doing. I explained to them that we're applying for the permit according to the regulations of the town, and that we'll follow all applicable laws and build the house according to the existing regulations, and that's why we're here.
Thank you, Mr. Waskowitz.
Waskowitz, yeah. And I live in town for, I think, 10 years now. 15 Sunset Circle, Woodbridge.
Before I open up to questions from the commission members, I'll ask sort of a more sort of broader opening question, just so I have and it seems like everyone's getting a phone call right now about it. If you could just sort of step back to 30,000 feet and give me the overview of what it is that you're planning on doing on this site. Give me the highest level sort of discussion of your,
I think
ultimate sort of goal that you're seeking here.
I think you could see it. It's 2 single-family homes, as allowed by the regulations, as they've been actually, the prior owner combined it just to save money on taxes. He did not want to pursue the second lot. There was previously 2 lots. And again, that's the goal, is to do what they were designed to do. The circle that was never finished, again, the town was overseeing the developer, and that's probably 50 years ago. Unusual that they were not made to finish the circle. The existing storm drain that's there is tied into the new system. It works very well. Again, it was. I know the neighbors oppose it. I guess the town was actually approached to buy the property for. I think we paid $28,000 for it. The neighbors didn't want to buy the property, I guess. So we bought the property like we do in a lot of towns, and build what's allowable.
And could you give a little more detail on the extent of excavation, the things that you're actually planning? Again, assume that I am someone who can look at these plans and not actually know exactly what you're trying to do.
So, I mean, you've seen in town, there are houses that are on hills. So this is quite a steep hill, and we have to make some bench cuts. So I think the biggest cut is 35 feet. We've done cuts of 100 feet. And again, whatever we do is to the standards of the zoning regulations and safety, so that we're not looking for any exceptions. We're willing to finish the circle if we had to. I spoke to the first select woman. At one time, I guess the town was gonna try to sell the circle for $100,000 to the developer, which to me is insane. In these situations, typically, the abutter, which is us, would get the property for nothing. If the town, which has been abandoned for, I don't know how many years. So, you know, we've tried to sit down with the town, but again, I guess there's some angry neighbors that are not happy about it. If I was to nitpick, we could go through and talk about runoff from their properties, but I'm not here for that. I'm just here for, to get approved as by the zoning regulations. We're removing more than, I don't know what the allowable amount of yardage is, and that's why we need this permit to begin. And then the other comments, like I said, if we had to finish the circle, if that's the way the town is, I believe it's considered a paper street. I'm not sure if you guys know that language. But to access our property, that road was designed to access these lots. We could, like I said, use a common driveway and an easement to not have to finish the circle. You know, that would be an option. And again, it would be all in accordance with existing zoning regulations. There's no special exceptions, there's no, you know, there's nothing other than the formality of coming to the hearing and hopefully getting the permit.
To what extent is additional blasting going to be
Well,
needed?
blasting, we're trying not to do, because that's when you would have to have a pre-blast survey. Blasting is what affects foundations of quite some distance. And so, again, we're confident that we will be able to take the rocks out with our experience. And we have, you know, machines that weigh 120,000 pounds. The hammer itself weighs 12 to 15,000 pounds. And, you know, we anticipate 1 month of that kind of heavy knocking of the rock. You know.
But the determination as to the necessity for blasting couldn't be made until after that portion of the project?
Yeah, and again, we're not making a tunnel, you know, we're just breaking rock. And as to infiltration, which was coming up in the other meeting, as you break the rock, there's some cracks. We would make some storage systems because, you know, like a table, there's no infiltration really, other than the cracks that we make. And then we would design infiltrators. And then probably a storage tank, because we want to be green and be able to water the grass and stuff. But that also would take some of the water from these storm events like today. And then the rest, like all over the town, once everything reaches capacity, it would overflow and go into the storm system.
Do you know anything about blasting having been done at the 110 Luciani site in the summer of 2015? Is that
I don't know.
something you know anything about?
From what I understand, when I met the developer, which is a different from us, we do things differently. So the previous owner, they tried to come in with some small equipment, and again, they pulled a permit and they redesigned the house to kind of, it's like a funny looking house that was approved and they could start building. And I guess we could submit for that drawing and build it so it conforms, you know, because they just gave up and, you know, markets opened up elsewhere and they just decided to walk away from it. And so again, it was available for the town to buy or the neighbors to buy, and we bought it.
Other question I had was in regard to the, you know, this map that came with the application. I was just curious, what is a, I know Mr. Commissioner Schatz doesn't have his, but I see that other folks
maps in my pack.
came
I don't have this
prepared.
map.
I'm just curious, what are stockpiles?
Well, that's just, like right now, we tried to also remove 100 yards. We're currently building on 181 Ford Road and we need some fill. So I sat down with Christine and we went through the regulations, and the regulations said I could remove 100 yards of fill. The town attorney, because I like to talk to the zoning enforcement people before I do anything, the attorney said I can't do it, and then I would get a cease and desist order. So I said, listen, I need something in writing. And the response was that he's not gonna give me a response in writing, which I find unusual. But a stockpile is what's there already. It's just material, excess material, that if it's topsoil, you wait to redress the property, or while you're waiting for trucks, you just temporarily store the excess material or topsoil for later use.
Other questions from commission members?
I have a question, maybe this is more of a Chris question, just about the history of this site, because it seems like there has been attempts to develop this site, and I see there's existing excavation on the site. So there was some attempt to build something there. Was there any issues with actually building the site, or was it just a process of somebody walking away from it, or was there some structural issues that were hit and they just decided that it wasn't worth to follow through with this development?
Well, I think that's the case, that it became too much of a headache, and they did not have the necessary equipment to do it. And with the neighbors not being happy, they decided to move on, cut their losses.
So it became too much of a headache because there was too much.
Well, they in their opinion, there was not enough maybe profit. You know, the market has been funny since COVID, so they had other projects, and again, it was, I believe, too difficult for them to deal with for various reasons. But again, they pulled a building permit, and we could probably pull that permit and build that house, but it would be not a typical looking house.
And Kathy, if you don't mind, if I follow up, what makes this a difficult site?
Well, for us, not for-
that the prior developer would have found too difficult. You already said that there's basically a
If you don't have the right equipment and the right operator, you just bounce, right? So, if you split logs, so you need a maul, people watch professionals use an axe, but even with an axe, a professional can do it. Then the bigger, if you get a maul is like 5 times heavier, and so it splits the wood much easier. So without the right experience and the right equipment, things are difficult for people.
Robert had a question.
No, I actually, again, have a comment, 2 comments, and it's for the protection of this committee, and I think, for the town and the responsibility that we have as a committee. So with all that said, these comments, obviously, you may not be able to answer, maybe you can because of your expertise, but the first comment that I have is around the environmental protection and the tree removal piece. That's always an issue in any development, as you probably know, and especially in the town of Woodbridge, where protection of land is such a hot button. So, hiring an arborist to look at the trees that have been removed, or having a plan in place on, hey, we have removed X amount of trees, but we're going to replace X amount of trees in the development of the property, might be something that the developer, may want to have in their back pocket if that issue comes back up in front of the town. That's one comment. The second comment is, and you've already brought it up. We have, this committee is in receipt of a letter from Bruce and Grace Cross, the owners of 115 Luciani, and as you mentioned in your comments, it sounds like there's been some heated discussions out on the street with the neighbors.
Not with them.
Or not with them, but with maybe the other gentleman, Mr.
They're nice people.
Yeah. So, again, having a resolution of options, to address, because, again, we want to avoid any issues. And if that hasn't been thought through, it's my recommendation that, it is before, we get too far down the road. So, those are my two comments, Mr. Commissioner? Mr. I've said that all day, and I don't know why I'm stuck on that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
I do have a very brief follow-up. We are in receipt, and maybe Chris, this is also for you, we're in receipt of the Bruce and Grace Cross note from September 6th. Were there other
That's all that came in.
written submissions? You don't have other comments from the public that you have that we
Oh, I
don't?
think that a lot of them are here.
Oh, no, I know that we're gonna have our full public comment session, understood.
So no, but again, we do this all the time. It's a not in my background syndrome. And what we cut there was sumac. I have pictures. And as to trees, we comply with all regulations. So we're building houses. There's no wetlands on the property. We will plant and do a nice project, and we have no problem with that. We do proper landscaping. And safety is our biggest concern because, you know, really, the plan is for my kids to move into the houses. You know, we speak about affordable housing, and
I'm sorry, if you're gonna be delivering something, you should,
It has to come to me.
yes.
Oh, sorry. So, that's our intent, you know, for the price, for what it's gonna cost us is just diesel. We have the equipment, and we build all the time.
Other questions from commission members?
Just so I have the right school engineer.
Yeah.
And we can definitely call up our consultant to help us on this one.
Yeah, no, but at the beginning of your presentation, sir, you said, you said there were comments, and I think you were talking about, School Engineering's
Yeah.
August 25th. So, but did you want to respond to any specifically, or do you feel like?
We could go one by one, but I wasn't sure if you didn't look it over. You know, really, I don't object, except for the tree is kind of, it's a out of the ordinary. If it was a public project on public property, that would be a proper thing, or, you know, for the town. But, you know, we're not gonna leave any trees that are dangerous. The fencing would be permanent, as on the plan. There were some comments as to the stormwater drainage, as in the previous, that he asked to be added. We have no problem with that. The location in the existing easement, we have no problem relocating any of that. You know, if we had to do the circle, we probably don't have to but again, to make it look proper, maybe it should be done. But again, that would be a different, I believe we'd have to talk to the selectmen. I don't believe this board, right, unless we go forward with the application to build the road, you know, I'm not familiar with that process. So the rock slope, that's where he was talking about let's see, on the general notes, does the town have plans to future modify the cul-de-sac? That's what we're talking about. The cul-de-sac has been there. And again, the previous owner had conversations with the town to buy it, but the number was kind of very, very high. The proposed 35-foot high exposed rock slope, it's talking about the gradient excess of, so again, we would not design anything that does not meet the zoning regulations. We'd be at a minimum, you know, of any zoning regulations. It's recommended that the tree arborist, that's what we talked about, as-built after the property, which is usually typical, but they're making sure that our grades are in compliance. A narrative, okay, so the safety process, like we'd have temporary fencing around the whole site. They had the previous fencing in front of the site during construction, and then we would have permanent fencing, which is shown on top of the hill with no trespassing. And we haven't had any problems with any of the neighbors. There's no kids up there trespassing. There's no water coming from the direct neighbor on top of us. Again, the only water that's coming to the site is being directed from the top onto 108 Luciani, and then diverted to our property. Let's see, it's recommended the stormwater structures and maintenance sediment plan be in the construction sequence. And then, again, the other issue was the sediment trap. That would be, we put hay bales out there already. There was somebody I thought was on the zoning commission. He works in Ansonia as a medic or something. Stopped on the site. He mentioned he was part of zoning or something. So I said, whatever you want. And we did it, you know. So
It's the
we-
blight enforcement officer.
well, whoever. We respected everybody. We tried to talk with the neighbors, but they didn't really want to listen to what I had to say. But I think that answers all the questions.
Could we just go back to the number 2, because I think you might have skipped over a part where it says is recommended that a geotechnical engineer supervise, inspect, and report on the rock cut in the final grading.
Number 2,
Under general
Under
on
general.
page 2.
stormwater, number 2. Okay. Geotechnical supervisor. That's not a requirement by any law or agency. I mean, if we were blasting, you have monitors that do that. As to gradient, you have an as-built. The engineer here maybe could answer what is that comment specifically that Ms. Hunter was inquiring about.
So we'll bring up our consultant.
Well, it would help,
After
you know, yeah. So again, I see it more as making sure that we are within all zoning regulations. Infiltrators, there's a plan that is designed and meets standards. With ledge, it's a little different because ledge is not permeable. But we would, again, we could increase a storage capacity. We could increase infiltrators. There's gonna be a lot of crushed rock there, so that's not gonna be an issue.
Other questions at this point for our applicant? Do I see any down the way? I do think it's an opportune moment to bring up our consultant, possibly to even start where Kathy left off. So, Chris, does he need to reintroduce himself for the record?
Yes, he does.
Would appreciate that. Thank you.
Jim Cruddy, professional engineer and licensed surveyor with the state of Connecticut, Criscolo Engineering, 420 East Main Street, Branford, Connecticut. So the comments, I'll start with the rock, so we're kind of out of order here, but that's fine. The comment on the rock slope, he may in fact meet or be able to meet the regulations with regards to cuts and slopes and that thing. The comment was about, without any kind of investigation on the type of rock and the house being only, I think it's about 10 or 15 feet away from that rock face, that's 40 feet high. I don't know what's gonna happen during freeze-thaw cycles, rocks popping out of that rock face. I think it needs to be investigated. To that end, the other comment about the trees was about investigating the trees along the top of the slope in front of this cut, what root areas are affected and the longevity of the life of the trees at the top, again, for what could be a future problem. The question about the cul-de-sac, I have no idea if the town has any inclination to want to normalize that cul-de-sac at some point in the future. I mean, it has been there quite a while. But if they build it to any standards, this plan doesn't work anymore the way it's designed right now. This second, the lot 15, the second driveway goes to about 124 at the edge of the road to the garage for 134.5. That's 11 and a half feet over the slope, and the contours indicate in the cul-de-sac area goes from 125 to 130. It's over a 30% slope right there. I'm not sure who the engineer is that put this together, but I think there's some problems with the plan. The applicant stated
you know, the infiltrator systems for the roof drainage, and there is indication on here about runoff, and there's an area, a pervious area that's calculated, and it does state downspouts are lead directly into infiltrator, but both lots clearly indicate roof drains that are not going in the infiltrators. They go into yard drains and then directly into the town drainage system. There's no indication of the size of the pipe coming out of the catch basin in the town drainage system, so I have no idea what the capacity of that is by adding all this water directly into it, a hard pipe connection. I mean, there's a number of, you know, these comments have to do with basically clarifying this plan. I think there's a number of deficiencies.
Can I respond to the few comments you made before I forget?
I think I want to first ask my commission members if they have questions, but we'll be able to go back and forth. Because that, to me, I'll ask you a similar question. Is this a difficult, challenging site to build on? And in your opinion, why?
Yeah, it's a challenging site. Can it be done? Most likely. But again, without knowing the quality of the rock, I have concerns over a rock face that steep.
And just to be clear, so we don't know what type of rock this is, what?
I haven't seen anything to that effect. But just to be clear, and I noted it here, the existing contour under the back corner of the house is 175, and it says bottom of wall 135, so they're excavating 40 feet in that corner.
Can you help walk me through on exactly where I should see that?
So, is your print green and red and black?
Yes.
So in the back corner of the lot 15 house, there's a black line that says 175, it's dashed, kind of cuts across the corner of
A dashed 175
Yes,
contour line.
that's the existing grade right now. Along the back wall of the house, there's a note there that says top of wall 145, bottom of wall 135, so that's the footings, 135. At that 175 contour, that's a 40-foot cut right there.
So at that intersection of those two dotted lines, one's the 175 current contour, and there's a dashed sort of line, which I'm not sure what that one is. Yeah, a 5-foot contour. No, I think that I'm a little confused with that. But anyway, so you're saying that what is currently, so there's going to be a 40-foot rock face.
So they have to excavate 40 feet right in that spot, right in the house, to be able to build this house. And then then it'll slope up at 1.5 to 1 to the top of the slope, or 5 to 1.5, sorry. 5 feet vertical, 1.5 foot horizontal. That's what all these green contours are indicating. So there's quite a bit of rock that needs to be removed here. And then there's just some other things that I commented on, I don't really understand, I think need to be clarified. The proposed sediment trap, I'm not really sure how during construction the runoff's supposed to get into there. There's no indication of that. And the line that indicates a temporary sediment trap shows a label for a 130 contour on one side and 135 on the other side, but it's the same line, so I'm not really sure what's going on with that.
And that's kind of right in the middle.
Right in between the lots, yeah.
Yeah. So I do see that temporary sediment trap, looks like it's lower in the top left corner than it is in the bottom right corner.
Yeah.
But they're all connected
That's the way the labels are, yeah.
Okay. Other questions from our commission members for our consultants?
What sort of geological study would be required in order to determine the nature of the rock on this?
I mean, I think someone needs to at least go out there and look at it and, you know, different rocks have different stability, you know, I mean, if it's, salt or trap rock, like Tilcon uses, they cut those faces and they don't ever move. But if it's other, you know, if it's something that's more shale-like, water gets in, freezes, pops pieces off, somebody would really need to kind of make that determination what type of rock is there and what kind of stability it has through freeze-thaw cycles.
So you would recommend like a geotechnical engineer going out there and looking at the rock?
It's my recommendation, but he is correct, I do not think it's a requirement.
Well, I would note for our commission members that we're operating under, the request here is for a special exception permit under 3.N, and our regulations and the rules for special exception permits are in the back of the book at section 6.3, governs our special exceptions, and 6.3C talks about the thresholds for granting a special exception, where we are supposed to consider things like the health, safety, welfare of the public in general, and the immediate neighborhood, the location, size, proposed use, the nature, intensity, safety, traffic, etc. There's 7 different factors in C that we consider, and D says that the commission may, if it finds that a special exception is appropriate, include reasonable conditions and safeguards related to the factors set forth in 6.3. So I would argue that we do have the opportunity related to those factors in 6.3C to say, yes, we are concerned about things that our engineering consultant has highlighted of potential challenges on this challenging site to develop, that we could include reasonable conditions. And I'll look to Chris to make sure that I'm reading those things.
I believe you're reading them correctly.
Great. Good, glad I am. So back to our applicant.
Well, I would say that the commission already granted it on this site for a single-family house. And again, to clarify, part of this application was not a full application for the housing. It just said, please show relatively close to what you're gonna do. So we're here just for the excavation, and that's why I said that the plans will be changed accordingly to the site conditions. And again, it has been approved, and I believe you're reading the health and safety as to what we're doing. That's why the safeguards of the fencing and all that stuff. And again, it has been approved before. It is buildable. Difficulty is not anywhere on any application. As to the standards we have to meet, yes, we have to meet zoning regulations.
I appreciate that. Can you please help me, because I'm now confused. There is an existing approval to do what on
The
this
previous owner had to go for.
Which is not you.
Yeah, had to go for the mass excavation prior to him getting that building permit. Right? So he came in front of this board like I am now, and I'm reapplying for the same right to do the excavation prior to pulling my engineered, everything that he needs to his standards. We're not here for that. We're here to acknowledge, to place these houses, we need to take 40 feet out of this corner. And if you look at the slope's already steep, right? So it's kind of deceiving as to the cuts. It's just that we're stepping it down to make it in compliance with regulations, right? So if you went there, that right-hand side is kind of deeper into the hill. And the left side, he already took a 30-foot cut, and he didn't go far enough back, right, when he had his previous excavation permit. So what I'm here for is the excavation permit. I'm not here with a formal building application which would address all the engineer's concerns.
I hear what you're saying, though. I'm a bit confused by it, because you are here asking for an excavation permit.
Which I have to do because, again, and I believe I can take 100 yards out right now, but I don't want to, I'm not here to escalate things. I'm here to have a discussion and again, clarify that this has already been granted.
But I want to pause on that. What is actually, is there anything active that you could
No.
operate on? That's what
No.
I'm getting at. There isn't,
Yeah,
something was granted in the past
there's
by
zoning
if I could
approvals.
please
Yeah.
just finish a sentence. There was something granted in the past on this site, and someone did something on this site. They excavated some amount of material. That is a prior owner, a prior commission that approved some prior work. We have what we have in front of us, and what you're hearing from our consultant is that there are elements, and he's obviously more expert than any of us are on what these plans are saying, but as he's walking through them, he's highlighting a bunch of things that are raising concerns. They are flagging things that don't seem to make sense in the only thing that is in front of us, that you want to excavate a large amount of that rock face. And we want to make sure that that's done according to our regulations, including in a manner that in which takes into regard and consideration of the health, safety, and welfare of the public in general and the immediate neighborhood in particular. So those are the things we're trying to get at, and I haven't heard what's going on with the sediment trap, or what's going on with the confusion about the roof to the yard, and the challenges of, do you know what type of rock this is even?
Yeah, but that's not the question. That's not part of the application, and the engineer agrees. You know, we're talking apples and oranges. The sediment trap, there's a detail of what we're talking about. It's just something that the storm drain won't clog, and the water has to go somewhere and not create a mess in the neighborhood. Okay, so that's nothing about health and safety, and it's simple to address, right? And again, all the other issues as to the pipe locations and the infiltrator system will be addressed when, as the other people did, went and got a zoning application after he got the excavation permit. So once we deem we got enough excavation done, then we don't need that permit, and we go and apply for a regular house plan, just like any other single-family house in town. And again, we should be treated like any other single-family house, we don't have wetlands, because then that would be another issue, right? But rock is not an issue. It's a degree of meeting the zoning regulations.
But our zoning regulations require us to have this special exception permit for the excavation of rock. So that is a thing that is the only thing.
It's not of rock, of any material in excess of a certain yardage, depending on.
You are excavating rock.
In this
Correct.
scenario.
Yes.
But that does not change if it was stone, not stone, gravel or dirt or whatever. It could be peat moss. Once you go over a certain yardage, that's what's in the zoning regulation. It has nothing to do with the type of material, how you're taking it out. If I was a farmer, I could take even more out, but that's a different regulation. Health and safety.
But again, we're talking past each other, I think, because those sorts of concerns about the impacts of this excavation on health, safety, the environment, I believe is one of those factors, are the things that we actually have to consider in whether or not to grant this special exception.
But it was another board, you're right. It was granted, and I'm still waiting to hear what are the issues of health and safety, other than you using the terms health and safety.
Can I just speak for 2 seconds?
Yeah, sure.
So the previous permit that was issued was a special exception permit for the site development of a house. So it was site development. It included the house and all the design that went with it, inclusive of sediment and erosion controls and storm drainage and all of that, because there isn't any other place for that to take place. Once they issue their special exception, the zoning permit that gets issued is to show that the house is going to be compliant in terms of setback. It doesn't have anything to do with all of the other things that are being covered by the comments that are being made by Mr. Preety. So that's why it has to be on this plan.
Oh, well, that's not what we were told.
What happens with this, or what happened originally, was there was a permit that was issued. To the best of my recollection, the gentleman who had the permit was busy with some other projects that he had, and he did not start this project until it was almost expired in terms of the permit that was issued. And so then he came back and he got an extension, but he didn't finish, and the extension that he got wasn't for a full year, it was for a limited period of time, and he didn't finish. And for whatever reason, he was having issues getting the material out. Part of it was he started late, and part of it was he maybe just didn't have the equipment to do it. Then he came back with a different plan, and that different plan had steps to it and all sorts of stuff, and that plan did not get approved. So then he had no plan. So he had a building permit for a house, but that's now expired because building permits, unless you act on them, are void after 6 months. So the building permit is dead. The original excavation permit is dead. This permit, or any permit for the site development of this property, in how it's been done before, and not only on this site, but other sites in town that required excavation permits, always showed the complete site development of it, because then once that was approved, that's what you went forward with. And so I think just to cut the back and forths, does that help to explain?
I wish we knew that, but our understanding was that we just had to show the cut and fill.
And that's why it's important for them to
Yeah,
know
I
it.
think
And
that's the sticking point.
And so, one of the prior permits that was done, the comment that was raised by your Bob Criscolo, who was a former developer or whatever, was the concern about the rock coming down. And it was for precisely the same reason that Jim now raises. Because they're small lots, they're tight, and you just want to make sure that you're not going to have any falling rock coming down. I think that's, at one point in the second set of plans that came, there were actually steps to the plan in terms of, so that if a rock fell off, it would come down and fall on a little plateau before it went down to the house or whatever. But that's why it was included in here, just so that there was a complete plan that they could approve, that then the building official is just looking to make sure that the building is code compliant. He's not going to look at the site development. Does that help everybody?
So Chris, what you're saying essentially is that what happened before essentially is null and void. We're starting from scratch, and in order to move forward to the next level, more details need to be provided.
I believe more details need to be provided. I don't believe that they can't be provided, but they need to be provided, and that's
So there's
where
a
we're at.
disconnect between what was assumed and what is needed.
There you go.
Yeah,
Okay.
And apologies for that.
for any misconceptions that were out there.
Appreciate it. Robert, do you have a question? I think there's also, I don't know if, Susan, did you?
No, I guess it's more, I think we're saying the same thing, right? From a process perspective, what's in front of us right now is inconclusive. It needs revised.
It needs additional information.
Revised additional information. So I guess that's where we are, right? We can't move forward.
Well, a question for our consultant, how did you review these plans with that full sort of review lens of?
Yeah, so I was looking at it, does this whole thing work? I think there's an inherent danger to both parties by trying to separate that excavation permit from the development permit here, because if you grant an excavation permit and he goes and does all this work and takes however long, hammer and rock, and you ultimately don't approve the plans, well, that was for nothing, and that's really a problem for both sides. So I think it has to be looked at together.
So where does that leave us procedurally? We have a public hearing, we can keep it open.
You can keep it open and they can address the comments and revise the plan, just like any other application.
And we've always allowed the two engineers to speak, outside of your meeting, so that, if there's questions back and forth.
And just I always forget our timelines and requirements.
You
Once
have
we
35
open-
days on your own to continue a hearing. So
I'm sorry.
you have 35 days to continue a hearing. So you on your own can extend the time for this hearing to allow the applicant to provide additional information. And then depending on whether you feel that that's adequate for yourself, the statutes provide that you can also give an extension of time. So it's up to you.
Well, the question I have is, same the engineer brought up, is the cul-de-sac. You know what I mean? We tried to talk to certain people, and we didn't get any answer. So to truthfully design something, we would have to know the answer on the cul-de-sac. We could design around it, and again, I don't believe that, I'm not an attorney, but again, like a geotechnical report is not a requirement. We have to show that we're meeting, we will show that we're meeting zoning regulations. As to that one particular thing, I don't think it's mandatory. And as to the cul-de-sac, who do we talk to about that? Is that a zoning? I mean,
So let's take the cul-de-sac
yeah.
question first, because I don't believe that's something we decide here.
I believe the cul-de-sac, this was a subdivision, and typically when subdivisions are done, and I haven't looked at the deeds for the subdivision, so I honestly can't answer, the town is deeded the right-of-way for the road. And, you know, the town doesn't develop, the whole road right-of-way isn't developed when a road is put in, because roads are typically 22 feet to 24 feet wide. Typical rights-of-way are 50 feet wide, so there's always an area that's undone. So for whatever reason, when they did the cul-de-sac in this particular subdivision, they didn't call out the whole area that was part of the cul-de-sac. And so, but it's under the ownership of the town. So I believe it has to go to the Board of Selectmen, or, you know, that's where they're the people.
So the town owns the cul-de-sac that doesn't conform to what a normal cul-de-sac would be, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying it doesn't conform to what a normal cul-de-sac should be. The cul-de-sac has to meet road specs, and somehow a plow turns around in there or does something. Why it's in its current configuration, I don't know.
What is the current configuration?
Whatever's out there.
I guess I'm trying to.
Without being flippant, whatever is out there.
So
Oh, I see.
from
Okay.
the
I got it.
From the plan, it looks like it's
So there's part of it that
two-thirds. It
hasn't
looks like
been
it's 2/3 of a
cul-de-sac.
So
I
you-
mean, typically a cul-de-sac, you need to be able to turn a plow truck around in,
So
or a
you-
school bus, or whatever.
You're saying the town's right-of-way in terms of the cul-de-sac is larger than what is presently cut out and paved?
And paved, correct.
There's two pieces to it. There's the right-of-way, which is the property area, and then there's the edge of pavement, which I'm not sure the subdivision standards exactly, I don't have it in front of me, but I think the right-of-way is 50 feet and the pavement might be 40 feet radius. And that was never done. I'm assuming that the Luciani Road was accepted as a town road at some point,
Pre-me.
or deed.
I mean, I can check, but it's pre-me.
I mean, typically, in recent history, there would be an as-built, and the road would be accepted by the Board of Selectmen or whatever, or Town Council, and then, there'd be a deed transferring the property from the subdivision developer to the town. That didn't always happen past 50 years ago, but typically that's the kind of thing that happens now. Or there's money held in bond, in case things need to be fixed. I don't know the specific history of this one.
But this is again an investigation that would have to be undertaken by the applicant with the town about whether the town will require the completion of this cul-de-sac.
I don't believe he would be responsible for the completion of the cul-de-sac.
No, not responsible for completing it, but inquiring whether the town is going to. He can't give an accurate map of what he wants to do until he knows if this 2/3 of the circle is going to be a full circle or not.
Right, so he can ask them, does he have permission from them to excavate, to do what you want to do within that cul-de-sac?
That's whom?
Board of Selectmen. Or alternatively, he said that he might be able to do a common driveway that comes in and then splits off. So, but I think
So
the question of the excavation of the portion of the cul-de-sac that's shown to be excavated on the plan has to go to the Board of Selectmen for some kind of comment.
Somebody has to decide
Right.
before
and
we can do anything from here. Someone's got to decide whether the cul-de-sac's going to be completed or left as is. That's not under our purview.
And or permission to actually excavate, because again, I'm not a pro at reading these even after a few years here. Just to the applicant, you are going to be excavating part of the area that's near the cul-de-sac, correct?
Well, really, all the work that was done there was by the previous developer. All we did was clear the shoemack. So we would stay on our property. But I believe we have the right to develop the road as shown, because even though it wasn't.
So just so
But again, I can't speak for the town. Usually you have a town engineer, it's like a highway department that kind of would be at a meeting. But again, this town does not have or maybe they do, Public Works. Maybe it's a question for Public Works.
So if I'm reading your proposed plan, you would have an asphalt sort of apron and driveway that comes off of that edge of the cul-de-sac.
So I believe we have the right to access our property, and again,
Yeah.
even through the undeveloped cul-de-sac.
And you don't want to complete the circle, that's not in your,
Again, we wanted to just start the excavation process. We could show, and again, we could step potentially if we deemed it necessary for controlling the rock. So that's why we thought in other towns, you just get an excavation permit first, and then you work out the rest. And whether we build a house or not has nothing to do with anybody, that's our own risk, in my experience. Which and again, you could check with council and other people, but we want to try to keep it just simple.
and what we're trying, or at least I think we're trying to do here, is to understand the other steps you have to take before we come back again
Yeah.
in a month, probably at our next meeting, with the continuation of this hearing. So I think there needs to be some clarity from your end, not us, to understand the relationship between what you're doing and
From the town.
the cul-de-sac. Yeah, you need to go ask the town. We are not the town in that regard.
But when you go to start the process, we start in zoning.
On this
That's
narrow,
where I'm
on the-
confused, you know what I mean?
on the narrow question of the cul-de-sac is what all I'm talking about right now. The other items are addressing the things that were outlined by the town's consultant. Are there other items that need to be clarified between now and the next time they come back? I'm asking our commission members.
Well, is it my understanding that the current permit is expired, so you have to reapply and resubmit?
Correct. That's why you have this application.
That's why I'm here.
Right, so, again, I think just procedurally, there's certain things that you need to go back and do, and then come back in front of us.
And I'm just asking, is there anything other than what our consulting engineer has highlighted in his report? And the question of the town, interaction with the town
But
on
I
the
think you have to
cul-de-sac.
clarify the extent of the drawings for the excavation permit, if you could, with the city attorney. Because I don't believe that it's a requirement. I'm not looking for a building permit.
But hopefully you understand that we're trying to understand the full extent of what you're trying to do, including the location of a house underneath a cliff, which has rocks on it that we don't know the types of rocks they are, whether they're stable, whether they're falling. Those are the types of things that we are concerned about, as highlighted by our consulting engineer.
But again, I don't believe that's in your purview.
We'll disagree.
But I think also, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you said that if a permit to excavate the property was issued, you excavated the property, came back, and then the commission didn't approve the next step, that's a risk you're willing to take, or you just said that hypothetically?
Yeah, no, in our business, it's always a risk, right? But at the same time, what we did say is we would address all comments to date that we believe you have the authority to make us do, right? So we're saying the same thing, but before we could do this, we have to excavate. To say there was a little shale on top, and then it's all hard granite in the back, right? So that, it's not the red, rusty, flaky rock. And we wouldn't take a risk on it if we did not believe it's buildable.
But, and perhaps I'm misreading our regs. Once we grant an excavation
It's not
permit,
coming back to you.
it's not coming back to us. It is a single-family house on a lot that's already been cleared and excavated. So this is our one opportunity to understand both what is being excavated and what is going to be put there post the excavation. So it is very relevant to the things that we're trying to understand, that this construction in this site comes before us for a special exception permit based on our regulations 3.3N and our review of special exceptions, which are in 6.3.
Can you clarify that? Because again, I'm just asking for excavation. That is the name of the permit, excavation permit. It's not a building permit. It's not a full application for house. That's my confusion, is that this is a special permit you need to do your mass excavation. If Toll Brothers was here, for example, and they had to take so much dirt, and maybe they do have an
do.
application in
They
front
have
of them.
4 applications.
Yeah, but they're doing a totally different, this is a single-family home, and they have to go to the state because of all the amount of work they're doing.
We are reviewing the Toll Brothers application for an excavation permit because they are moving a bunch of dirt as well. and
But
we're-
I'm just clarifying that in what we understood, we were just going for an excavation permit. And it is stated that that's what we are applying for.
And
Under
that is
special exception.
under a special exception, which requires us to understand what you're doing
All right,
when you're
but-
done with the excavation. It
We'll
does.
get there, yeah.
Other questions for our applicant?
I think there's just a disconnect in the scope of the project.
I just need a formal letter stating exactly what you're looking for, under what regulation, to understand, because again, the way we read it is totally different. So if you're telling me I have to go for a whole building permit, how about if I don't want to build, right? How about if I just want to get the approval? It doesn't, I'm just confused on what it is actually that I need for this, just one permit. And I just, if you could get me something in writing.
The building permit is just for the house.
Yeah, so, but we're not
I'm
talking
just-
about it, a house.
Is just for the house.
We-
It's not the site plan. He does not review the site plan. In this particular instance, the site plan, because it's an excavation permit, is reviewed and historically has been reviewed by this commission. In the normal scope of things, the house that you're building over on Ford Road didn't require any of this, and the only thing I had to look at was, is the house conforming? And I could issue you a zoning permit. My zoning permit is not inclusive of stormwater management or concerns about rock that may fall or infiltrators and how the drainage is gonna happen and all that stuff. That falls into this commission's lap when it's a special exception excavation permit for the purpose of developing a house. That's all.
And we will have that in an email communication that will clarify that you are asking for an application under 3.3N, and that requires a special exceptions under 6.3, which has in its list, I'm looking at it right now, all the things that you have to present to us: a site plan, a narrative statement on the proposed use, and data about building location, building use, parking lot, all those sorts of things.
But
That-
a site plan shows a setback, and I could build anything I want in that setback. That's where the disconnect is what you say a site plan is. There's the language.
I'm
is
looking at the
different.
list of what we require.
So I don't have it in front of me. Can you repeat, there was a clause in there about the
And-
final use of the land?
Yes, so an application for a special exception shall include the following: a site plan application form, a narrative statement describing the proposed use. So
There you
it
go.
gets at what you're gonna actually do with the property.
Right, so to answer
It's a
your
single
original
family.
question was about, could I just excavate the land and not build a house? No, because for the special exception, you need the uses of the land in a narrative form.
And in addition, you need to show us the building location, the building use, the parking, the landscaping, the signage, the special requirement, hazard mitigation, which I think would reasonably include how you're dealing with rocks potentially falling on this house that you might be building there. Natural drainage and sedimentation erosion controls, architectural plans and elevations. So this, it's all here.
All right,
And-
but that's confusing why we weren't sent, that's all.
That section was provided to you along with this,
I
the
got
earth
you.
removal section.
I'm not an attorney, so I just pretend to be one. I'm just kidding.
No, and what I think you're hearing from us is that we have, all we got was your one-page cover letter and this, which is not what we typically see in a special exception application where we have all these other things.
I got you.
Okay.
We're gonna continue the hearing.
We're gonna definitely continue the hearing, but we have a bunch of members from the public. I'm happy to move to public comment. And this will be one opportunity for public comment. We will obviously have another opportunity for public comment. Thank you to the applicant.
Thank you.
Unless we have any other commission members' questions for our consultant before we go to public comment?
Thank you.
No. Okay, so Public comment, thank you for your patience. Please feel free to come up to the front. I will give once I find my paperwork, I will give my normal admonition and rules of public comments, so if you bear with me, thank you. So the public comment portion, thank you very much. This is a public hearing for the purpose of listening to your comments. You will each have up to 3 minutes for your brief statements into the record. The TPC members and the applicants will not be answering the questions that you may raise. Your public statements and any written comments that will be submitted to the town, which are welcome to do so, particularly since we're keeping the public hearing open, will become part of the public record for the TPC to consider in its evaluation of this application. As a reminder, off-the-record communication with a member of the commission on the merits of this application is prohibited. And please, we do request you keep your comments brief and focused on the proposed application and try to avoid unreasonable repetition so we can hear all the concerns that you and your neighbors may have. So please, when you come up, please state your name and sign in for the record.
Sure. Rosalie Rowland. I live at 102 Luciani Road. We were here with Mr. Vizzo, who was going to develop this property. And if you read the records, all the notes, he was very, very familiar how to develop this site. Well, it turned out he wasn't. And Bob Criscola even wrote in one of his memos, it's a very, very difficult slope to develop. And it turned out it really was. This Mr. Vizzo kept jackhammering, there's rock and everything. Couldn't go any further. And then he wanted to blast. And the wall is just so high, I guess it didn't meet the requirements that your committee wanted, okay? Now, the day that I met this man, he was cutting down trees, and I have pictures of it, okay? He was cutting down trees, and I went up to him nicely and asked what he said. Oh, I own the property. I can do whatever I want. I said, wait a minute, you're going for a hearing. Oh, it doesn't make any difference. I own this property. I can do what I want. You know, they have to finish this cul-de-sac. Otherwise, if they don't finish it, I'm going to sue them. I'm going to sue the town. Because they didn't finish it. Plus, I need the right-of-way, or I have to buy the cul-de-sac to get to my other property. Now, Shiki Luciani built all those homes. And I lived in New Jersey, and not knowing how these homes were, we purchased one. Okay, so now, if Shiki Luciani could have built 2 more houses, he would have. Everybody knows that. And his son sold the land to a woman, and she never saw the land. And then she sent somebody, and then she realized she couldn't build because it was just too steep and everything. It would be too costly. This man right away said he's going to blast, and all the neighbors heard it. What? I'm going to blast. Believe me, I'm going to sue the town if they don't do that. And you know what? You people get water in your basements. Now, I lived here 42 years. We never got water until Vizzo fooled around with the land and something with the storm drain. And up on Ariel Road, the end house, the man showed me how the water comes down Ariel Road and then it diverts all the way across. And then it went down to the street. Mr. Vizzo broke all that, how it was diverting. But this man says the town is responsible for now that we're getting water because you people didn't fix the problem from Ariel Road. So we have to sue you people because you didn't fix the problem. And when it snows, where is the town going to put the snow and the ice? Now, between my house and my neighbors who are new, ice forms, and you could call the first select woman or the building inspector. They have to come every time it gets cold to ice it, to sand it. It's so bad with ice. We didn't have this before. So something is going on in that land. Mr. Criscolo, he said it just is very, very difficult and very costly. And the original man was supposed to put a retaining wall because I think it was a Mr. Usick, I forgot his name. He's up on Ariel Road. he was looking at the plans and he said the house is so close to the wall that who's gonna be responsible at the end if you have boys and they're jumping from the hill onto the roof of the house and one gets hurt? He looked at it this way.
And I'll ask you to wrap up. We're a
Okay,
little
he looked at it
thank
this
you.
way, somebody, the town, the builder has to be responsible because it's an unsafe to jump like that, but you can't tell kids that they can't jump. I just wanna show you where this man, and then I'll end, said that he was just taking down the poison ivy.
Chris, can we receive photos? Is that,
We can receive, can you submit them?
do you have electronic versions to submit?
Can I send you? Okay, well,
If you can send us a PDF of them, then we can put
Or a
that into the
scan?
record.
Yeah,
well,
we'd be happy to.
He said he was only taking poison ivy down. He'd take town trees down too. On town property. And then, there's one particular here, he's cleaning up the property, this guy, and he's drinking water. And then what does he do? He throws a bottle of water.
And we're happy to take these electronically. It will be the easy, and that way we can make sure they're on the website as well.
Bottle of water. Well, why don't you put them in your system and I can pick them up? What do you think?
I can try to scan them on the machine downstairs. And It'll come out the best I can.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you, and your time is up.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come up for public comment? Thank you, and please sign in and introduce yourself when you get to the microphone.
My name's Mike Wolter. I live at 66 Luciani Road. I'm not abutting property, but I've been living down there for 28 years. Seems like we're going through this again real quick. Appreciate that, some of the questions the commission was asking. I was gonna ask about style of house, et cetera, but it's not a building permit application, so forget that. The excavation permit, as you know from previous, the other applicant who abandoned it didn't do any blasting, but he was doing hammering, and I could feel it 1,000 feet down the road. And other people got their foundations correct. I owned one a few houses away from there, and luckily I didn't have any cracks in that foundation. But my concern with this application for excavation is that, Commissioner, I think you asked him if you knew what type of rock he had. He didn't answer you directly, okay? And then he says, a little bit of granite, or slate or shale on the top and granite underneath. Well, I think you really would have to get a geologist in there and let him know what he's going to be excavating. Because if he doesn't know what he's excavating, it could open up a can of worms, especially with the runoff and everything else that everybody on that whole west side of the street below Route 63 suffers from. And it happens all the time. And it has been getting a little worse up there. The previous applicant, obviously he left, no matter what his timelines were, he failed to do it. And the place looks like an abandoned, used quarry. And I feel sorry for the neighbors that live next to it, because it's really unsightly. I mean, it's just a mess, okay? He didn't really address too much about if he does excavate, you got the cliff face and surrounding properties. Are you gonna fence everything, safety notices, et cetera? Because it's a pretty high cliff face there, 35, 40 feet. That's high enough, okay? And, you know, it's not applying for a building permit. He just wants an excavation permit. Now, what if he goes in, he excavates everything, and then he decides, here's a risk. I don't want to build a house here. Well, then what happens? What's it going to look like then? Is there any way to make a person who's excavating a place restore the land, okay? Because it as it's now, the previous person did not do anything to restore it. There's piles of shale and everything there. I mean, it's really bad, okay? The runoff would be a certain concern if it's excavated. Because like somebody mentioned, that storm drain that's right down in the corner at this unbuilt cul-de-sac, and that's a whole nother issue if he decides to put a building up there. But where's that water gonna go? Is that catch basin and storm drain there? Is it gonna handle that water? Because otherwise, the end of that street's gonna be, it's gonna be all ice come winter, or even flooding during a regular time, okay? So I think there's a lot of stuff that this commission needs to really get more information before you issue any kind of a permit of any type on this property. Because as Rosalie said before, the previous builders, when they built that development, they left those 2 lots because they knew they were gonna be a real problem, okay? And we've already seen it once, which was a fiasco. Let's not go through this again. And if you do allow an excavation permit of any kind, he's got to restore this place back to some kind of something instead of the way it looks now. Especially if he doesn't build a house, ask for a permit to build a house. You just can't leave it looking like somebody went in and dug up a bunch of junk and left the rest of the stuff he didn't want. Okay?
I'll ask you to wrap
So
up.
anyways, that's all I have to say.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to come forward for public comment? Thank you, sir. Please sign in and then state your name for the record.
Yeah, it's Michael Vaskov, 73 Luciani Road. Last time, 7 years ago, when other person tried to destroy our beautiful neighborhood, member of your committee just visit our beautiful street, and they understand absurd of this project. This is a flat. Our buildings located very close to each other, very close. This gentleman do not explain to you. He not gonna blast this rock. He gonna use heavy equipment. Vibration from heavy equipment probably be worse than any explosion. And as I mentioned, our building located very close to each other. So I recommend you, as previous committee, just visit our street and you understand absurd of this project. Thank you.
Please sign in, sir.
Oh, thank you for a reminder. Thank you for your comments. Would anyone else like to make public comment this evening? I do remind folks that we are going to meet again next.
Rosalie, you can't. No.
Yeah. No, we need to make sure everyone who hasn't had a chance to go has a chance to go who would like to. Do I see any others? No. Well, I think we're going to, just so members of the public know, we're going to continue this hearing till our next regular meeting is my sense, and we'll figure out a motion to that effect. So that's another both opportunity between now and then to submit written comments to Chris Sullivan at Town Hall. Those will be part of our record. It'll remain open until the morning of our next meeting, so you do have time for that. And then at that next continued public hearing, you'll have opportunity to make public comments then again. And I do realize that you've been here for 2.5 hours, and I appreciate the time that folks have spent waiting. So I do appreciate that, and the willingness to perhaps come back again in a month's time. So
Move to continue the hearing.
until the next regular meeting,
Which I believe is October 3rd.
October 3rd.
I think.
And do I have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of continuing, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? And Susan, you were on that one, just so you know. For purposes of keeping us fair.
So at the next meeting, will that hearing go first?
I believe so.
typically, any new hearings start first and then, but this one, you reversed what you normally do, so in all due fairness to the applicant, I think
Yep.
you should let them go first.
I think that's fine. Agreed. So thank you all. So are we moving to a work session, new business?
New business.
New business.
You
I'll
have
let-
2 applications that you're receiving. One of them has to be scheduled for a public hearing, and that's the one for Anytime Sport LLC, 136 Bradley Road. It's an application for a special permit for use of the building at 136 Bradley Road for commercial recreation and a fitness indoor soccer facility.
So that is a request for a special exception permit?
It's a special exception permit, and it requires a public hearing for that
I'll
use.
make a motion to schedule that for a public hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? I think we should have that at our next regular meeting. Will they be ready for it?
Short, yeah.
With the scheduling for our next regular public meeting, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? We shall see them then.
Okay. And then the other application that you have does not require a public hearing, and it's John Heffernan who's here from 9 Lucy Street for site plan approval for 2 additions to his existing restaurant building at 9 Lucy Street. Because it's a commercial building, as zoning enforcement officer, I can't just issue that unless you say it's okay.
Okay, so would the applicant like to come and speak about the proposed expansions? And we regret that your food truck is not parked outside.
Did you bring samples this time? Take it, strike 2.
You know?
I gotta come down to find the truck.
Yes, you do.
So in your package, you should have the site plan and floor plan.
Yeah.
So, the existing building doesn't have a basement for storage, so, I am bumping out where the kitchen is back 18 feet and 16 feet wide. I was gonna do it the other way, but apparently we would have encroached on Christopher's property, and actually works out better. The amendment we made to that. And then I'm also changing the door. So the front door for all the patrons is in the middle of the dining room. I wanna move it to a vestibule right on Lucy Street, so it's like an 8x8 area or whatever that they walk into. Yeah, well, it's on the Lucy Street side.
Versus where the current entrance comes in from the parking lot, you would have.
Correct.
And faces Amity, yep.
Gotcha. Thank you. Questions from the commission members of the proposal?
The little jog in that he had to make for the storage area is because there's a,
The easement.
it's not square across the back, it
Correct.
angles, and so to meet the zoning setback, he needed to push it forward a little bit, so that's why that's there.
Originally, it was gonna be 16 by 18, now it's gonna be 18 by 16. It actually works out better,
Well, that's good.
so.
I'm not seeing that, I'm sorry. Where's that on the plan?
It's on
The
the
back
next page.
of the L,
Oh, it's back here?
yeah,
Oh,
so there's a vestibule off the front with an air trap so patrons don't get cold
Or hot.
or hot. And,
Extra, like, bench seating in there as well, kinda.
And then all of the additions are, as I've looked at them, zoning compliant, so there's no issue with,
How long to do this work, Mr. Heffernan?
Couple months.
Ready to start?
Yeah.
So do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, discussions?
Wait, I gotta write that.
Sorry.
So,
We're trying to get him so he can
I
start
know
building
that.
tomorrow.
I just have to, I got all these guy voices and I can't always tell them apart, I'm sorry.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? No. Good luck.
Thank you,
And no,
appreciate
you
it.
Thanks
can't
for your
bring
patience.
samples, sorry.
Our work session on
You can go to toll.
toll, who have been waiting patiently. You left where I got to thank everyone for their presentations and their the question, the responsiveness to our consultants and the like. So we are now in our work session on the 4 different applications from the Toll Brothers. Should we start with a motion to approve and then actually formally discuss it in the discussion, or be less formal? I don't think it matters. Let's just open up discussion. To commission members, are there things that, having had our public hearings both last time and this time, anything that you wanted to raise in our work session or discuss at our work session?
I think that the concerns that we had and which overlap somewhat with the concerns expressed by members of the public have been addressed in terms of the extension and continuation of the sidewalk and closing the square, so to speak. I think that the concerns about the stormwater management have been explained tonight, and our consulting engineer concurred that it was the best way to handle the stormwater runoff with respect to this property.
Thank you. Other comments on either sidewalks or the stormwater runoff, putting the traffic into, I think, a different bucket where I think we should have a discussion about that.
Not here, Mr. Chair.
I think they did, I do agree that they addressed those concerns on the sidewalk extensions, appreciated, and I think we have hopefully a reasonable understanding of the stormwater systems and generally how they work. The traffic to me is...
Just can I make one more comment?
Yes.
I agree with what you said. I just hope that, to one of the neighbors' comments, that if we have a drought and it does get dusty, they will be considerate to the neighbors who have to put up with the construction for that whatever's that 1 to 2 year period.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Yeah, no, that was also something that was asked of the applicant. The traffic to me is I think I now understand more about traffic studies and how they operate, and they are not simple or easy to understand, particularly in the very sort of, in many ways, rigid format in which they are analyzing the one peak hour and not all of the hours of the morning, which was something I learned tonight, that those numbers are really about that one point in time. And yes, there will be people who are leaving before that time, there will be people that will be leaving after that time. And I did appreciate their review today of how this development compared to the prior development and compared to if this were single families, multifamilies, other. The challenge here is that the traffic is not great in the morning down there. And that left-hand turn onto 63, if you make it, you feel like it's a challenging one. I just don't see that this development is having that significant of a delta, an impact. Yes, there will be some additional traffic, but I tend to agree that this is not a huge move in that direction to the point of, nor do I believe that there's a way to solve that larger problem in this application. Those are my 2 reactions, but I welcome.
I think that those are the 2 issues, and taking them in reverse order. There's the traffic is awful at certain times of the day there, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah. Now, I made this comment last time, and so I'm on the record already. The development within the region that now flows through our town has a huge impact on traffic. And I agree. I don't believe this development in of itself is going to be that that final Achilles heel where we need to make some, some decisions here as a committee. Traffic needs to be addressed, and the traffic patterns need to be addressed, I believe, at the state level. There needs to be a plan from the DOT, from the state level. We don't even know what's going to happen from the DOT plans around the Merritt Parkway and the expansion there. If you're able to make it through that chute coming down Litchfield Turnpike or Amity Road just to get to, if the DOT expands that, I mean, it can really open up. So I learned a lot in terms of traffic as well, and I don't necessarily agree with the projections, but I don't believe this development in of itself is the Achilles heel in traffic.
Others?
My office has been down there for 28 years, on Bradley, between Amity and Litchfield, so I've lived it. Even if it did get worse, I still believe that you can't sacrifice a development like this for what could be a couple of dozen extra cars. And I do believe anecdotally that it's better now than it was pre-pandemic.
Right.
So, and the DOT has offered a plan.
Yeah.
It's just 20 or 30 or 40 years away.
Yeah, 30-year one.
So,
And to be fair, the not just the applicant's traffic study, but our own consultant concluded as well, no significant impact. No significant detrimental impact.
and also, look, the town is always talking about getting more people down into the commercial district. This does that by default. So it's one of the goals of the town right out of the gate.
And that was echoed by one of our public commenters as well. Other reactions, comments?
Well, I think that's why we have, experts, traffic control experts from both sides of the aisle, and, I'm certainly not an expert in traffic, but I think you have to listen to what the science says and what the numbers say, and, it shows that it didn't significantly contribute to a traffic issue. And I think the need for increasing our housing supply just really, just putting on my other hat as the housing, part of the housing committee, we need housing, and this does that. It provides a diverse supply of housing that's needed in Woodbridge.
Any further comments, reactions, thoughts?
So moved.
Well,
A
you can't
motion.
just do that.
So,
I move we approve, I'm sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
No, if you have it on your mind, Paul, go right ahead.
Well, before you do, I would add, there was that, I think, appropriate
Right.
discussion about having our approval have language about
They have that here, yeah.
stormwater measures being permanent
Part of the
as
condition.
part of our approval, which would then get recorded on the
So you have
record.
4 different things that you
I
have
know.
to act on.
I'm trying to figure it out.
And so.
What comes first?
Doesn't really matter, we can't do it, the project without having all of them. When I look at them, they all have expiration dates, except for the sediment erosion control certification. So when you make your motion, just say, as required by state statute, because the statutes keep changing, because developers can't build because of COVID or because of economics. So I'll insert the proper date for you, if that's okay with you, just to make sure that it's statute compliant.
So you want to give the lawyer a try?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, beginning with the first bullet point, I'll make a motion to approve the site plan with the addition of the concessions that were made this evening with respect to the extension of the sidewalk, and with the provision that a note be published on the site plan which states that the proposed stormwater management measures to be installed on the site are to be considered permanent fixtures.
Should we do them one at a time? Is that easiest?
Yeah.
Best.
I will second that motion.
Moved and second. Any further discussion on the motion before us? That motion also includes the deadline. Is that what needed?
There'll be an expiration date and
according to the state statutes.
according to state statute, and it will, just so you are all, when you get your minutes, they're all longer than what you're saying now. It will reference to all of the plans that were submitted, and, because you're gonna base it on that which was submitted.
I attached to my motion all of that language.
And it was seconded again by Paul.
I'm still seconding it.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? So the first motion on the site plan is approved. Do you want to go again?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve the application for a special exception active adult community pursuant to sections 3.3 EE and 6.3 of the regulations,
With an expiration date according to state statute.
with an expiration date according to state statute.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Motion number 2 passes.
Next, I will make a motion for certificate, to approve the application for certification of sediment and erosion and/or stormwater site plan approval pursuant to section 5.5 and 5.7 of the regulations. Again, with the added condition that a note be published on the site plan which states that the proposed stormwater management measures to be installed on the site are to be considered permanent fixtures.
And with an expiration date according to state statute.
And with an expiration date according to state statute.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Number 3 passes, and Andrew, one more.
I should just, before you start to make a motion, note that at some point you need a bond,
Okay.
Okay.
and it's probably more likely for this part of it, because this is the part that you worry about, the excavation.
Okay. I will move for the approval of a special exception for excavation, removal, filling, grading, and processing of earth products pursuant to section 3.3N of the regulations, in accordance with the deadlines provided in state statutes, and with the posting of a bond in the appropriate amount. Do we set the amount?
Typically, what you've said before is that the applicant proposes a bond amount, and then, your consulting engineer reviews it and
Okay,
accepts it.
that a bond be posted based on the applicant's proposal, but subject to the approval of our consulting engineer.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions, and it passes. So, thank you, Andrew, for going through that exercise. Thank you, commission members, and thank you, the applicants. Congratulations, good luck, and we're excited about this potential development. I think it's really going to be transformative for that part of town.
Good luck.
In a good way.
Good luck.
It's late.
Was there anything else?
Really?
Was there anything else on?
Well, I'm just trying to, oh, shoot.
What?
We have to remember when we continue the hearing on 110 that this is a picture of cracks. So I will put it in the folder and we'll enter it into the hearing record.
Okay.
Picture of crafts?
Cracks.
Crafts.
Foundation
Crafts,
cracks.
I get it.
Plus, Rosalie Rowland's photographs are
I
going
got
to
the
be entered
photographs,
into the
yeah.
record as well.
I know it's really late, folks. Is there a 5-minute version of your correspondence you've received, or?
It really isn't much. I sent you a copy of the newsletter. I always encourage you to read it because there's stuff in there that, that's the only place we get to see it.
So with respect to the AT&T tower, which I believe is on the former Woodbridge Country Club property, now in town of Woodbridge property, they just want to put additional antennas on the same tower?
It's additional antennas, same tower. We have nothing to say about it because it's siting council, so I'm just throwing it out there in part for the public to know that we received correspondence regarding it, and also for you to know, so that if for some reason somebody asked you, you know, what's happening.
Did anyone get a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
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 Could we do a quick motion to approve the
So moved.
July
Second.
5th meetings, approved and seconded? Any edits, comments, discussions on the July 5th minutes? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say extensions. July 5th is approved.
And I'll move to approve the minutes from the special meeting of August 22nd, 2022.
And seconded, Robert. Moved and seconded. Any comments, edits, suggestions, changes to those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? None. Alrighty, Scrog, while we're packing up, anything to report?
Yeah, there is a meeting this Thursday, I believe.
So just real quick, for your October meeting, you had talked about then talking about what you were gonna review, what Glenn Childer had sent you in terms of the regs. Homework. And so he cannot, he just sent me an email late today. He's not able to make that meeting.
Good.
So let's-
Extension on our homework.
Let's push it to November.
Yes.
Okay, so just.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so you wanna do that in November. And then you'll have the two hearings. You're gonna have 110 go first.
Yeah.
And, this other one
Anytime
go second.
sports.
The sports.
Anytime sports.
Okay. And anything else that comes in? Motion to adjourn.
Moved. Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank
And
you all.
Who seconded? Yanni, did you second?
No,
Andrew did.
Andy.
Yes, whoever did. Sorry. No, you care. But,
So
good
now I
night.
can tell you, I also gave up stuff for your meeting on the 22nd.